So we'll get started. Just say apologies for the last cabinet. I wasn't able to be here. I forget what the reason was. It was either COVID. Was it COVID? Oh yeah, I was positive, COVID positive at the same time at last cabinet meeting. So my apologies for that. So, as usual, welcome to everyone, cabinet, councillors, members of the public to this cabinet meeting. We are asking people to remember that we are observing social distancing. Please wear a mask while moving around the room unless you're exempt from doing so. You're not required to wear a mask when speaking. As usual, the agenda papers and public forum submissions are available on the Council's website. Just give you a heads up that agenda item 10, expansion of Flax, Bourton, Mortuary, and 11, leisure facilities, investment and procurement, contain exempt appendices with commercially sensitive information, and any discussion on the content of this appendix will need to be held in exempt session. So cabinet members have been given access to this, appendix. Can I draw your attention to the emergency evacuation procedures, which is outlined on the agenda and currently being displayed on the screen, and also to remind you that the meeting is being webcast. So please speak into the microphone when you are speaking to ensure you are heard through the webcast. And just a reminder that statements and questions will be taken at the time of the relevant agenda item is being discussed. So I'll reply to any questions or ask the relevant cabinet member to respond. Agenda item 3, apologies for absence. We have none. Oh, I see Don behind, social distancing. So no absences today. Declarations of interest from anyone in relation to today's agenda? None. Okay. Matters referred for consideration by scrutiny or full council. That's agenda item 5, and there are none on this occasion. Agenda item 6, reports from scrutiny commissions. There are none on this occasion. Agenda item 7, chair's business. I've got a few things to share. So I will take advantage of being the chair to talk about a few things. One is about delivery, levelling up, living with COVID, and the announcement of our international ambassadors. So yeah, I do just want to just share that over the last week or so, we've made quite a number of announcements that I think really demonstrate the commitment to actually delivering on a manifesto and getting things done in the city, building the city systems we need to meet the needs of a growing city that has to meet its population's needs in the face of a climate and ecological emergency. And that includes, actually at its heart, building an inclusive city, an inclusive economy, tackling those drivers of inequality. So we've had the Jowl Ferry Bridge undertaking repairs as part of a £15 million investment, repairing 6 crucial bridges that connect the city. And this is part of the city's infrastructure that often goes overlooked, but is absolutely, essential. And there were so many areas that have been like an unserviced car in Bristol, just left to cope over the years, that we're now picking up the challenge of securing. Portway Park and Ride, the first new train station in Bristol for 95 years, which will soon be followed by a new station at Ashley Down. Improvements to the number 2 bus route, and thank you to everyone who's taken part in the consultation, on that, delivering predictable, reliable, segregated bus routes throughout the city as much as possible as we can in an old city is absolutely, essential to transitioning people over to public transport, and in course building the case, or continuing to build the case for a mass transit system. The first livable neighbourhood pilot is being rolled out in Bristol East, so early engagement has begun, so residents can shape our plans for Bristol East and that livable neighbourhood and wider transport options for the region. On mass transit, as I mentioned earlier, but pleased to say we secured £5 million with WECA to continue development of the mass transit plans. A recognition of the need for tunnels as an option if we're going to get a public transport system segregated and connected in the confines of an old city, and a commitment to come back with costed, dated, measurable delivery plans in April. So that's incredibly positive. Really pleased to announce the work in the Bear Pit. Actually, green roofs and green walls is a place where we can support ecology. Someone I don't know who, I didn't notice the name, but someone did comment, you can't force bees and butterflies to go to the bear pit. I think we're well aware of that. But you can create an environment that they can actually land in and live in. Hengrove Park, which is a fantastic announcement for us, and I was up there with Tom just last week. Gorham Homes are now going to be taking on the delivery of that site, guaranteeing 50% of the 1,400 homes we build there will be, affordable. And I will share with that, we've done some interesting work on waste, looking at different waste systems, and I think you'll see some, exciting interventions in this new scheme around how we integrate the more efficient management of waste and maximising waste to energy and to reusables through that scheme as well. So I'm looking forward to that. And Cabinet will hear more today about the plans for scaling up our delivery of affordable homes through Project 1000. And I think Tom has been really chuffed to be able to announce £1.8 billion through investment in council housing delivery over the next 30 years in our HRA budget proposal, which will come as that section of the wider budget to full council next week. It's one of the most ambitious council house building programmes in England, if not UK. On Western Slopes, which is the final thing I'll talk to on this in this section, we have made the announcement that we're going to scale down housing development on the site to protect the habitats in the area. As we said at the time, with the development of our ecological strategy, we had a new framework with an additional framework for thinking about how we balance competing needs within the city. So we asked for a study to be done of the site to make sure that we are making a decision with a full understanding of the ecological value. Not all areas claimed as ecologically significant are ecologically significant, hence the study. And it came back and told us, the study told us it was. So we brought that back into our decision and scaled back the delivery of housing on that site. But I will say this, because that decision, which I think is a strong one, also brings a challenge. And I said in my press conference last week to the journalists, surely the next question to come my way, which did not come my way, by the way, was, well, that's all very well, Marvin, but where are you going to get those houses? Right? 200 odd less homes in the face of a housing crisis in the city. We're already incredibly strained to meet not only our own targets, but the targets being brought to us by government. Right? And where are you going to get those homes should have been the very next question, unless you're only interested in ecology and you're not interested in the housing crisis that are faced by people within Bristol. 1,500 nearly 16,000 people on the waiting list, 1,000 families in temporary accommodation. Government target for us now, 60,000 homes over the next 20 years. We don't shirk away from the scale and difficulty of meeting that challenge. So what I suggest is that now we have made that decision, what we're asking people, and I've made this point a number of times, is when we campaign for something, please don't campaign and then just get what you want and walk away and not deal with the consequences of that, right? It's a complicated city. It's like a Rubik's Cube. You move one thing, other things need adjusting. So if we are going to protect those areas, then we have to have a conversation around brownfield sites and density on brownfield sites, areas that we do identify as not being ecologically significant. As yet, I'm not really seeing that conversation. I'm not really seeing people talk about the need to build with more density and height in a coherent way. What I do hear about is where people don't want homes. I'm not hearing about where people do want homes. And so that, listen, maybe it's not a thing for politicians to do normally, but that is my challenge. If we want that engaged kind of politics, we have to enter into that kind of conversation where we talk about, the very real competition there is for the 42 square miles of land that make up Bristol. We're not getting any more land. Homes, workspace, nature, and land for recreation, right? All competes for that same 42 square miles. So let's have a more rounded conversation where if we're going to say what we don't want, we're prepared to deal with the consequences of that and pose some solutions, but also, and I think that will make our politics better. On levelling up, the government published its long-awaited white paper last week. I think I was, very accurately reported as being quite disappointed with the paper. There were some things to welcome for Bristol, including the acknowledgement of the strength of the Western Gateway and confirmation of the £540 million coming in through the City Region Sustainable Transport Settlement. But we needed more concrete announcements on Temple Meads. It's a scheme that we've been encouraged, and I've had personal assurances we're going to be supported by government. Decisions are always going to be made. We're going to keep pushing on that front. It is a gateway along with the new university campus in Temple Island. When you line that up with the whole Temple Quarter, it is one of the most exciting regeneration opportunities in the UK, if not Europe. And with the prospect of building 10 to 11,000 homes in the middle of Bristol, within active travel distance of a major transport hub, the main retail, employment and entertainment area, that is an opportunity, again, to build efficiency, to build low impact into the future lifestyles of Bristol people, because they will not need, they'll be able to, to get around with active travel to everything they want. So we're going to be having some visits. We're going to be talking to government representatives and national representatives over the next few days, actually, and we'll continue to make that case. But we also invite our city partners who we've worked with on this scheme to make sure that they're pushing all channels as well to make Bristol case. I might even invite our local commentators in our news outlets, as they would up north, to really be advocates for the strengths of Bristol and the city region and make sure there are champions as well as trying to hold positions that hold us to account. But that's champions of the city, not saying champions of me. On COVID, that what we're moved into a space now that we have to begin to live with COVID, though it's the norm. So we're adjusting to a life with COVID. I think the opportunities, the positives in it is that it seems that the link between COVID and mortality has been weakened. People still do end up in hospital, but as I said, the link has been weakened. So we are in a position where we are better able to live with it. What we do anticipate over the coming year and 2 years is that there will be mutations. That we anticipate there will be flare-ups, and we'll see what they are at the time. But now we're into the area that we asked of Bristol some time ago, which was moving away from imposed restrictions and asking people to, one, make sure they are fully aware of the principles of transmission, how the virus is transmitted, and then to adjust their behaviour accordingly to minimise risk. We're obviously much freer in our interactions, but we know that by washing our hands, being distant with people, respecting their space, wearing face coverings, in appropriate surroundings, minimises the risk to you and to other people as well. So we go back to that phrase that we used a lot last year: we are kind, we are Bristol. Be kind, think about other people, and particularly where they may be having anxieties. And finally, I just want to acknowledge the appointment of our new 3 international ambassadors. Fuad Mohammed, who's the Chief Exec of Ashley Community Housing and a CLAW Fellow. Marty Burgess, who's a partner and leads corporate team at Bevan Britain and is also chair of Black South West Network and obviously the owner of Lakota. And Claire Reddington, who joined the Watershed in 2014, established its creative technology programs, including Pervasive Media Studio, and became CEO in 2018. Now, we set up the Ambassadors program because we were very aware as a city that there were people from all walks of life who were active on the international scene. If you remember back, our first ambassadors were Bungie, Ivor Anderson, who's a music producer from the band Laid Black, plays internationally. Chris Saniger, boxing promoter all over the world, was in Frank Bruno's corner when he fought Mike Tyson. And Caroline Hassan as well from Noah West Media Centre, again, very active on the international stage around tech. We've had Silas, the entrepreneur from UE, young Nigerian heritage man, started up his own robotics company that exploded. So we've really gone out to take advantage of that reach so many people in Bristol have already. And what they do is they go out, they promote Bristol on their trips, they meet mayors, they meet industry, and they really just support the city. Fantastic to have them on board. It's another example of the one city approach we've developing by getting people lined up behind the city's common interest. I'm very much looking forward to the fruits of their labour over the coming years. Okay, so let's get on to agenda item 8 now, our first paper, which is the Budget Monitoring Outturn Report at P9. And Craig, you're going to bring this item.
Thanks, Marvin. Sorry, I'll just find my place. This is the Budget Monitoring Outturn Report P9. This report provides an update on the Council's forecast financial performance as at the end of December 2021, the financial pressures faced by the Council, including the ongoing financial impact of the COVID pandemic and the proposals to mitigate them. This report also contains submissions and proposals for acceptance of new funding bids that have not previously been approved. The net projected outturn for the Council is an overspend of 0.2 million, which is made up of a net pressure resulting from COVID of 0.7 million, after taking into account the additional funding that has been received, and an underspend of 0.5 million on other business as usual activities. The main significant cost pressures to the Council include adult social care services, children's social care placements, education and homeschool transport, car parks income, energy costs and housing temporary accommodation. The Council continues to manage and identify mitigations in year and on an ongoing basis to ensure the Council remains financially resilient going forward. Negotiations regarding the Council's 2021-22 pay award have still not concluded, which could further impact on the Council's financial position. The savings position is included in the forecast above and is currently indicating that 5 million of the savings delivery programme is at risk of non-delivery. The report also sets out the financial position for the HRA, DSG, public health and capital budgets. The housing revenue account is forecasting an underspend of 2.06 million, with the increase in the forecast underspend being largely due to reduction in the allowance for increased defaults on debts that were expected when furlough ended. However, based on latest projections, this is no longer expected to be the case. Within the dedicated schools grant, there is a significant risk to the Council where the in-year deficit on the DSG is forecast to be 16.7 million, which, when added to that brought forward deficit balance of 10 million, will give a total deficit at year-end of 26.7 million. The main area of overspend continues to be the expenditure on placement costs for children with additional and special educational needs within the high needs block. The forecast in-year overspend has increased by 462,000 to 17.6 million. This is temporarily offset in the overall DSG figure outlined earlier by a favourable movement in early years. As we approach the end of the financial year and commence on the closure of these accounts, it is proposed that officers will report on an exception basis only to the March and early April Cabinet meetings, followed by the detailed outturn reports for 2021-2022 thereafter. Thank you.
Thanks, Craig. So we've received one public forum statement on this from Dave Redwell. So Dave, can I get you the microphone?
Yeah, thank you.
Dave, in this session you have 1 minute, okay? Okay,
just very quickly then, on the issue of the money that was initially put forward by the West Union Combined Authority, Craig, to undersea the eastern entrance and the money for Temple Meads, which I understood was some sort of loan system where we would then have the levelling up money from central government to sort of go into the pot. All I can say is I'm extremely disappointed that there hasn't been that money for the city and the city region. You made the point, Marvin, and I totally agree. I mean, we've worked for 10 years and the Transport Board for 4 years on meetings for over Temple Meads. It is the only major regional levelling up site in the southwest of England, be absolutely fair, and it's the only one on the transport hub. Whether you go to South Wales or go to Devon and Cornwall, certainly I know there's MPs further west that were shocked we didn't get it because it meant we could open up the throat of the station towards the west with 4 tracks, and it meant we could refurbish the station, and we're still now stuck on that issue. And I know that Network Rail lobbied very hard, so Peter Hendy. I know that there was MPs at work across the region, not just in the Bristol area. But I think we've used everything we can now to get that money, really. Everything, whether it's Transport Focus, Transport Select Committee, and going through the MPs, Westminster Hall debate, okay. We need to have that money. Because we can't do the housing, we can't do the regeneration Dave. On that site without a way of going forward. Thank you. Yeah,
thank you, Dave. I mean, on the levelling up, it's just I chaired. I'm co-chairing a group for the LGA. I'm chairing the City Regions Board I'm co-chairing it with the leader of Essex County Council, who's the People and Places Board, and we're chairing a steering group on the Levelling Up paper that we will then work on over the coming months. But one of the points we make, and I'm not saying this is, we'll find out what the thinking is that levelling up cannot just be a geographical issue. And it came through very strongly today that we also have to talk about people groups being levelled up, people groups who fall behind irrespective of where they are in the country. So if they're in the south, in wealthy spots, they get left behind. And actually, if they're in the north, as it gets levelled up, they could be left behind. What we are not doing is taking away from the fact that there is a geographical inequality between north and south. We would never undermine that. We're just saying there needs to be some nuance around particular groups of people as well. And that means that opens the door to places like the areas of deprivation in London, Plymouth, Bristol, and the rest of it where people are left behind. But we will continue to make that case, and we'll feed back to you on that. Okay. Any Cabinet members wish to comment on this item? Okay, so it's budget item, but I guess it's being saved up for next week. There's no other questions or comments on this. Craig, can I hand back to you to take the decision which I support and which will now be displayed on the screen?
Thank you, Marvin. In terms of the decision to be made today, I approve the recommendations as set out in the report.
Thanks, Craig. So on to agenda item 11 now, leisure facilities, investment and procurement. So I'm going to introduce this report because the paper, just to give notice, the paper contains exempt appendices with commercially sensitive information, and any discussion on the content of this appendix will need to be held in exempt session. So our starting point is in our commitment to provide top quality leisure centre facilities across Bristol. And to do this, we need to develop a strategy that is underpinned by sustainable long-term finance that enables us to invest in our facilities and make sure they are world-class, grow in usage, and are accessible to people. We've set out an envelope of up to £8 million to invest in our overall leisure centre offer across Bristol. That is a significant investment at a time of severe financial constraints on local government. However, with some services in need of expansion and renovation, we have to have a criteria and a rationale to determine how we direct our investment and our spending decisions. So we've looked at leisure centre usage, both in terms of footfall and usage by people who live in deprived areas. And on that basis, we've committed to retain the following in our contract portfolio. And they are Henbury Leisure Centre, Hallfield Leisure Centre, Bristol South Pool, Eastern Leisure Centre, St Paul's Community Sports Academy. These are by far our most used centres and are the facilities that provide access for our most deprived neighbourhoods. Hallfield, Eastern and Bristol South are all scheduled for further investment. The current contracts end in March 2023, and we're tendering for a new provider for those facilities. And our intention is that we'll work with providers to modernise leisure centres and leverage additional investment from partners. Hallfield and Eastern will actually not only be modernised, but they are actually going to be extended also. And these facilities sit alongside Hengrove Leisure Centre, which is the newest facility in our offer and is managed under a PFI contract, which is separate to this report. There are two facilities we're planning for the council not to operate. Kingsdown, which is a dry side only facility, as in it doesn't have a pool, and Jubilee Pool, which is predominantly centred around the pool with recent additions of a small gym. Now, Kingsdown's operating contract is up in March 2023. During the consultation around its future, we've already had several expressions of interest from organisations who are exploring an alternative lease arrangement with us, and we're looking on those favourably as a solution. There are lots of public forum contributions today which are under the misunderstanding that the decision being made today closes the centre, but it does not. Officers will be able to take forward conversations with interested parties to continue the leisure provision on the site. Jubilee Pool was to close in March 2022, but there is interest and an outline business case from the community is being worked up to take it over as a community asset transfer. This would mean the community could run it at a peppercorn rent at no cost to Bristol City Council, and they would manage their own operator. And so to consider the prospect of a community asset transfer and to allow time for the community to put together any full business case, and hopefully they'll do that with the support and the meaningful support of their local councillors, they'll be able to build that full business case. And we have extended the contract with the operator until September the 30th, 2022, to give them the space to do so. The consultation process and a public forum contributions today showed us what we knew, that people do value their local facilities, but not all problems can be solved by the council. So the decision we are taking today will allow us to invest in those facilities that serve the greatest number of people and open access to leisure and exercise to our most deprived communities, while looking for solutions with partners that will that can maintain the service offered by those other centres. But now we have the public forum statements and questions, so I'll go through these in turn. We have quite a few, so I'm going to be quite strict on the time, so please be gracious in that, so we don't have to interrupt. I'll give you a 10-second warning before your minute's up, okay? So the first up, we have Guy Pulteney. So if you can present your petition, and you have 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I present a petition of 1,992 signatures calling on yourself and the Cabinet to reverse their decision to stop operating Kingsdown Sports Centre, a very much loved and well-used community asset. I would remind the Mayor that I presented a different petition of 671 signatures in November, and a third petition of more than 600 is on the Council's petition platform. Sadly, not quite enough to trigger a full Council debate. It is, however, more people than took part in the Council's consultation in total, and the message is the same. There is no support for this policy. There is no support for the idea that the Council should stop operating Kingsdown Sports Centre. There is an overwhelming majority who want to keep Kingsdown as a local civic sports centre. What we also know from these petitions is just how many people are coming from
10 seconds.
Outside of Cottam to use the sports centre. It may be more than half, but staff from the BRI, St Michael's Children's Hospital, the university, schools, school clubs, friends groups and people referred by their GP all come together at Kingsdown to improve their physical and mental health.
Thanks very much. So we've received 19 public forum statements and 12 questions on this item. First call the people making the statements who have indicated they will be in attendance. The first is Paul Collins. Got a mic. And Paul, the same, because we've got a few. I'll give you a 10-second warning, okay?
Thank you. In arriving at its decision today, the Council is relying on misleading information regarding Kingsdown. You hear from others later about that. Worryingly, the views of young people have not been heard, including those who live in deprived areas and attend schools in Cottam and use the centre. Council says that efforts were made to reach out to young people, but there's no explanation of what those efforts were. Of nearly 2,000 consultation responses, less than 20 were from 18-year-olds. That surely suggests something wrong with the consultation. From experience, it suggests that these issues and others surrounding today's decision could be strong enough grounds to successfully challenging court any negative decision made today. I suffered from anxiety and eating disorders as a child and experienced an upbringing where facilities such as the sports centre were rarely accessible or welcoming to children. Deeply worried for the youngsters of our city.
Okay, 10 seconds.
Council will say there's access to parks and assume children will be happy to attend other facilities with no evidence. Please, Mayor, during this Children's Mental Health Week, show courage and make the right decision. Keep the centre open and properly funded and lead.
Thank you. Next up is Richard Timmis. 1 minute, Richard.
Thanks. Hi, I'm a user of Kingsdown Sports Centre and I consider it to be a vital community facility, that it should be retained by the council and continue to form part of the leisure centre package managed on behalf of the council. From the survey we carried out, we can show that Kingsdown users come from all walks of life and come from a wider area than just the Cottam ward. And it is also the fastest growing of any of the 9 centres managed by the council. The centre runs a diverse range of activities appealing to parents with young tots, school children, young people through to retired people. There are no other facilities locally that offer such a wide range of activities at the hours and prices that would make it as convenient and accessible for people to make the choice to have an active lifestyle. I passionately believe that the council ownership and operation of this site as part of the portfolio of
Just 10 seconds.
should be safeguarded. I would also like to offer the Mayor and anyone else on the top table a free pass to come and visit us at Kingsdown Sports Centre whenever we can. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Jean Joyner.
Jean Joyner, I chair Bristol and District Badminton Club who play at Kingsdown. I'm also chair of Avon Badminton Association. I have in the past chaired St Paul's Carnival and worked with Eugene Radio. And I only mention my chairing of these clubs and other organisations to try and put the lie to the notion that badminton is a middle-class pastime and a sport lacking in diversity. I grew up on Stapleton Road, played badminton with some other local West Indian, players from the West Indian community, and actually to get court time for our increasing enjoyment of the sport, it necessitated travelling to any and all of the council-run sports centres across Bristol. Because due to the number of other activities that use the sports halls, public court time for badminton was and is still very limited. But our favourite place to play was and is always Kingsdown Sports Centre. I've since gone on to win European medals, taken part in 3 World Championships, and have represented England. As chair of Avon, I'm committed to further increasing and widening participation in badminton because I know how important sport is to increasing confidence and self-esteem, especially within the community in which I grew up. Not including Kingsdown Sports Centre in the tender process will only serve to limit the availability of court time in Bristol and therefore limit the opportunities for eager young people, as I once was, to find a way into social and competitive sport. So as chair of Avon and on behalf of the national body Badminton England, I ask the committee to rethink this proposal.
Okay. I'm not going to come back in on, but the decision is not to close it. The decision is to look for an alternative solution and not to run it ourselves. So we really need to. I think there's been some, whether it be engineered or whether some misunderstanding of that. Next up is Nigel Burkett.
I'm Nigel Burkett. I chair both at Badminton Club, and Kingsdown's been our home since it opened in 1975. Bristol City Council helped create the centre in 1974 and have supported its operation for nearly 50 years. The decision to stop council support for the centre was suddenly announced to users without conversation or engagement in September 2021 and is based on seriously flawed evidence. Badminton Court needs at least 2 users, usually have 4 or more, not 1 as has been used in the evidence. Beaufort and Bristol badminton clubs have used Kingsdown since it opened. Many county, national and international players started to develop their games with those clubs. Bristol Swifts is a thriving LGBTQ+ club using Kingsdown twice a week for its sessions. These clubs have together about 200 ever-changing and diverse members as well as its current. University students are regular users of the courts and gym at Kingsdown. The facilities provide a crucial overflow for them as student sports facilities are oversubscribed. Given the history, current use and future potential for badminton, squash and many other activities, supporting a wide Bristol community, it'd be tragic to lose support of and relationship with Bristol City Council.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Lawrence Adams.
I live in Knightstone House, immediately opposite the Sports Centre, along with 32 other elderly residents. The Housing Association is managed by Live West. None of the residents are in favour of closing down the centre and redeveloping the site for the building, which does not benefit the community at large. I use the sports centre and so do other residents. Live West and Paul Crawford, the chief executive, does not approve of the mayor closing down the centre for redevelopment, involving the contractors spending months, years in demolishing the existing building and replacing it with a building which does not protect the health and fitness of the community and is not a focal point. Live West do not approve of their residents' lives being turned upside down by the noise, dirt and pollution. Elderly lives matter.
Thank you, Lawrence. Next up is Bryony Waite.
I'm Bryony Waite. I'm the chair of High Kingsdown Community Association, the area which includes the sports centre. The association has been fighting for a long time to preserve its sense of community against encroaching university expansion, HMOs, and a transient student population. Kingsdown Sports Centre is a focal point, and without it, it would be, and to lose it would be to the severe detriment both to the health of the and well-being of the community, and also to its cohesion. Not all the people living in Cottam are wealthy. Parts of the ward and its immediate surrounds lie within the most deprived 10% of areas nationally. The community was dismayed to learn that the site had been earmarked for closure without any prior consultation. Well, delighted to hear that you aren't intending to close it, but we would urge the council to develop the overall potential of the site and to attract a greater diversity of users.
Okay, thank you. Jeff Callard.
Thank you. It is frankly insulting and disingenuous for the mayor to say that you're not intending to close the centre. The effective decision is to stop operating the centre, and without support, it will go under. So we need the council to continue to support the centre. The intention seems to be to deprive Kingsdown and Cottam, the surrounding areas, including Montpellier, St Paul's, Redland and Clifton, of a highly valued public community for sports facility. Council seems to assume that this area doesn't merit public support because of the relatively high income of some of the residents of this area. This smacks of discrimination. Whilst it's true that there are more relatively high income residents in this area than some other parts of Bristol, it is also true there are a large number of local residents who are not well off, including some pensioners, single parent families, and many school and university students.
Okay, 10 seconds.
Private gyms. The aim of the Mayor and the Cabinet seems to be to centralise sports and leisure facilities in large sports centres such as Eastern. In this age of climate change, it flies
Okay,
in the face
that's the
of
time limit.
and government stated policy to reduce carbon emissions. Bristol City Council was the very first one in the whole country to declare a climate emergency. Policies such as this,
Jeff, we're going quite a long way over now.
centralising resources and cutting such means more people making longer journeys by car and bus.
Okay, thank you. Ollie Alcock and Sue Patterson are not able to attend. Their statements have been noted. I just check if any other members of the public who submitted a statement are here before moving on to councillor statements. I'll go through some names. Ian Blanturn. No. Rachel Cousins. Sophie Brown. Michael Mackrell. Martin Mullen. Tom Aldridge, Rahul Imarandira, Kitty Odell, Roger Caldwell. Okay. Yeah, I got Roger, yeah. Okay, you got a minute, Roger, okay? Okay, thank you. Christopher Elson. Okay, thank you. So we now have a statement from Councillor Gary Hopkins. So Gary, you also have 1 minute. I'll give you a 10-second warning. Okay.
Right. Basically, we actually in Knoll welcome an asset transfer. We just want to make certain it's done fairly and without unfair conditions being imposed. We actually are looking. We've got a very professional and enthusiastic team running things now, and profits are being made. We, though, want to make an investment into energy efficiency measures, and I notice in some of the supporting paperwork that it says that the council wish to back that and energy efficiency measures. And I have to say to the Mayor that you'll have the opportunity to vote for that in a week's time in budget debate. I sincerely hope that you actually put your vote where your statements are.
Thanks. We have a statement from Guy Pulteney.
Thank you. It has been 6 months since the community found out about the plan to stop operating Kingsdown and to pull council support from it. I would just mention the staff, by the way, found out on the radio as it was playing, which seems pretty shabby. We know a lot more now than we did then. We know how flawed the data was that was used to come to the conclusion to make that decision. We know that it used Cotham's ward profile to assess the impacts on equality and ignored the more diverse areas that people were coming from beyond Cottam to use the centre. We know how the data was skewed to misrepresent the number of people using the centre by counting a badminton court as a single user, so that if you compare it to swimming, in effect you're counting 4 people using a badminton court at Kingsdown as 1 and 1 person swimming in Horfield as 1, which is why the data looks the way that it does.
Okay, 10 seconds.
We know that Kingsdown Sports Centre was closed for 4 months longer than other sporting facilities, and we don't know why. We know that despite the somewhat baffling claim that the sports centre is attracting few new members,
that's your minute.
the sports centre membership has grown by almost 10%, more than any other.
Thank you. Okay. Thanks very much. So, Mohammed Makawi.
Yeah, I won't mention the history of the place as it is present in the memory of the resident of Cottam, as well in the city archive. This edifice extends within the lives and the memory of the resident of Cottam, and it is surrounding for more than half a century. It is the heart of the neighborhood and is the only outlet for the resident of the neighborhood remain healthy for all generations, as well as a social center for their meeting and event, different type of it, birthday, graduation, or community meeting to discuss various matters extra. The closure, which you said you're not going to close it, but
10 seconds.
Of the sports center is a closure for everything as that has preceded and more. It will kill the community that has gathered in this place for half a century and more than ever since it was swimming pool and then became a sports center.
That's your statement time allocated, just so we can make sure that we keep on schedule with the Cabinet, if that's okay. Did you want another 10 seconds to finish your final point?
No, that's all right.
Okay, thank you. So now let's move on to questions. The first 2 are from Paul Collins. Oh, sorry, I missed out. Ed Plowden. Is Ed not here? Okay. Okay, so let's move on to questions. Like I say, the first 2 are from Paul Collins.
Thank you. Page 13 of the draft leisure investment strategy states that Kingsdown Sports Centre is attracting few new members and is not retaining members in a very competitive environment. Mayor will see from the background information I've supplied that the Council's own data doesn't support that statement, and that all references to the centre attracting few new members and retaining members has been removed from the final strategy document and has not been corrected or referred to at all in the report to this Cabinet meeting. Could the Mayor please explain where the data to make that statement came from?
Yeah, so I'm just going to just start as well. I think I heard maybe the source of the imminent closure of the sports centre just speaking just now. This is not a decision to close Kingsdown. What we are doing is looking for alternative operators. Yes, there has to be a time frame on that, but this is about a search for a solution, as we are searching for solutions in so many areas. And it's not a policy of closing anything down. What it is it's in line with our responsibility to be financially responsible and work within the financial confines that we must work as an authority. But the data we've had is provided by the leisure operator to us on a monthly basis. The operator also provides attendance data and actually narrative on the performance. And what it shows us is that while membership increased in 1920, overall attendances dropped in the same period, and data shows a decline in overall attendance since 1718. So that's where we have our, the information has come in and been part of that framework for making the decision about where we focus the investment and how we look for alternative arrangements to keep our facilities open.
Thank you. The draft document didn't show that, though. It showed an increase. Okay, well, I can have this written to you so you can have a background on how the data works. Thank you. Second question, thank you. Qualities impact assessment recognises there's statistically significant number of young people in the ward where the centre is situated. According to the council's data of 2,000 responses to the consultation, less than 20 were from under 18-year-olds. Could the Mayor please confirm what specific efforts were made to consult the young people of school age who either live in Cotton Ward or attend schools in the ward? And what evidence does the council have to support the statement that young people would either want to or be able to afford using the facilities operated by Bristol University?
So the details of the leisure investment consultation were included in the head teacher's bulletin on the 29th of September, and March for Action was requesting that head teachers publicise the consultation in newsletters to their school communities on the basis that it was of immediate relevance to teachers, parents, and students. So working through that network. It was targeted at young people through a specifically designed advert on Facebook pages with the text made simple and to the point to engage 16 to 35-year-olds. Instagram was also used. I would actually just point out in that moment that this does actually feed into the importance of our communications team, which is always targeted every year, but now we understand in the budget. But the communications team is what we use to make sure that we engage people in these kinds of consultations, but you'll see that next week's targeting the budget. Paper copies and posters were made available at Kingsdown Sports Centre, other leisure centres and libraries, and we encouraged all citizens to respond. Officers also followed up with site visits to ensure these were clearly displayed and accessible. Council officers were, encouraged the leisure centre operators to contact their own gym members on 2 occasions, making them aware of the consultation and asking them to respond to input to it. A promotional toolkit was sent to partner organisations, including young people, One City partners, the voluntary sector and equalities organisations in the cities as well to share with their own networks. The toolkit was also shared with the ward councillors to promote and share details of the consultation with their wards. Did you have a supplementary question on that? Are you personally disappointed about the very few responses from that age group? Well, as I said, getting consultations to consultations is a challenge within the city. We'd love people to comment on most things we do, but people tend to focus on a particular issue that's of significance to them at that particular point in time, and sometimes don't comment on issues that they think are not of immediate urgency to them, and sometimes don't comment on issues that are urgent to them. But that's the importance of our communications team, that we go out, we proactively try and get people to engage in the budget, as we have been over the last few months. We get people to comment on housing. We try to get people to engage in our One City work as well. We would always want more people to engage, but it's not always possible to do that. The next 2 questions, if I've got this right. Brian Glasson, please. Oh, unable to attend, and Brian will receive a written answer. The next 2 questions are from Councillor Gary Hopkins. So if you can ask your first question, Councillor Hopkins.
Firstly, if I can observe, you've had no shortage of responses to consultation with regard to Jubilee Pool, even when they weren't really sought. Now, can I, on the first question, there's going to be, looks like we're now going to get a 6-month extension, but after that, you're taking the decision to close. Now, considering that the pool is not costing the council any money, that the operators are quite happy to carry on because they're making a profit from the operation now with community assistance, and that it's a very short time to make certain all the details are put in place. We have a position where the new owners, hopefully, or the new operators, the community, will be under pressure of time to actually agree to take things on with the threat of closure hanging over them. What assurances, given the track record, can you give that there will not be unfair conditions imposed upon the transfer that force the new owners into an awkward situation?
I'm just going to pick up a phrase you used there, Gary, because I think it's really important. And one of our responsibilities as councillors is to help the city engage in meaningful discussion and actually look for solutions in the face of a wickedly complicated world, in which sometimes we have to make decisions that people don't like, and sometimes we can make good decisions that can have negative consequences for some people. That's the full complexity of the context we're in at the moment. So again, it's something I picked up earlier on. It's a subtle thing, but when you just drop in there the decision to close, I would say to my children, if you want to create the space for us to have a constructive conversation and come up with a solution, please don't misrepresent what's actually going on here, because that's about motivation. There is no motivation to close anything. There's no decision to close. We're looking for an alternative solution in the face of wicked financial challenges facing this authority. All of these issues do not sit in isolation. They sit in the context of an adult social care crisis, a children's mental health crisis, the need to decarbonise the economy, to support, our transport systems. So, I would just ask for, in the name of creating a space for constructive, political conversation in the city, in the face of wicked challenges, that we actually, you use language that create the space for us to sit around the table and try and come up with a solution, rather than looking for victories and losses and victims and all that type of nonsense. But when you say unfair, it's again there's a dynamic to that, because it's unfair to who? Our job as an authority is not just to look to make popular decisions in and of the moment. Well, I'd love to. It'd be fantastic to have a whole bunch of ticks. Everyone loved everything we did, but we don't have that luxury. We have to be responsible with council money, because it's not our money, it's the city's money. And so we are looking at a financial envelope, as I said at the beginning, £8 million. We have a large number of leisure facilities. They need modernising. Some need updating. We have a desire to make sure that our facilities are most available to the most number of people, cross-referenced with the need to make sure that they're helping us tackle inequalities by being available to areas of deprivation. So it's not the case that we've looked at the sites and said, that one. What we do is we develop a criteria, a framework, work through that framework, and what it produces at the other end is what it produces. That's the most just way, of making a decision. Then when there are some downsides to those outcomes, we look for mitigations. We look for solutions on those downsides. Hence, looking at the community asset transfer, looking at an alternative operator, whereby we hope to work to come up with a solution that keeps those facilities available. And I was in a meeting the other day, and I shared, if we spent 75% of our energy on solutions rather than 75% on problems, we as a city would be a lot further forward in actually meeting the needs, the very real needs of our city in a challenging time. Now, I can't, I'm not in a position to say that to the public, but as elected members who were elected to lead Bristol, I think that is a very real challenge. And with your 20 odd years being in this chamber, I think it's one that is probably about time that you take on.
Well, the community in Knoll have provided the solutions, and the answer you gave there was nothing to do with the question I asked, which was basically to focus on the community asset transfer and how that's going to work effectively. We've got good management, we've got a huge enthusiasm.
Is this your supplementary question, Councillor Hawkins?
I'm just commenting on that lack of answer from the last time.
You can comment afterwards.
In,
But if you make a
report,
can I just
made available,
sorry.
Question two.
But I mean, you may not like my answer, but it was my answer.
Question two.
But you can ask your second question or a supplementary. So yeah.
Supplementary then, can you actually give us assurances that you will cooperate with a community asset transfer rather than stand off?
Well, yeah, we've extended the time to make space for the business case to be developed because we want the community asset to be successful. So we'll cooperate, but obviously there are some safeguards around that. This is a city asset. We have to be responsible with city money. And actually what we also want to do is make sure the business case stacks up, because the last thing we would want is for a group to take on an asset that then became a headache and they couldn't manage and turned into a hellish situation for them managing. But we will support people through that process and make space for it. We want it to be successful. Do you have a supplementary?
Two, in the reports made available to this meeting, officers have failed to take any account of the dramatically improved performance of Jubilee since the community got involved. As one example of what's actually happening there, 24-hour swimathon, 207 swimmers swam 293 miles and raised over £27,000 in a day. This is the sort of thing that's never done under council control. So basically, can we actually have up-to-date information being taken into account when decisions are actually made? We know how desperately wrong things go when you base decisions on Bristol Energy on out-of-date and inaccurate information. So can you this time get it right, please?
Okay. Well, I think the point you made, of course, Bristol Energy was set up by me, but anyway, let's not get into that. The point you made actually makes your point. What you've just said is that actually the usership of the pool has been so much better since the community has been driving it than when the council's driven it, which would suggest that actually the community are best placed to secure the future of that facility. So subject to the business case standing up and protecting the financial interests, of the asset and the council and being good for the community, it sounds like a community asset transfer would be the best vehicle for securing the future of that pool. So, again, I think you've run out of, but you'd be welcome on that sense to actually be in the place of, offering much more of your thinking time to supporting the development of a solution rather than trying to score political points. But, that's ultimately your decision, obviously.
In the follow-up, we put in a petition at the beginning which welcomed asset transfer as a good way forward. Over 5,000 people in the community supported that and pressed for that. In actual fact, we've not seen the enthusiasm from the authority for that until very late in the day. And the initial consultation on Jubilee Pool said that that was not a viable option. It had no future at all. So can I ask you again to look at the detail of what's actually happening now?
Gary, it's the same answer. I mean, as I said, you've just said that the enthusiasm around the pool was not there when the council run it, and since the community's taken over, there's a lot more interest and usership has gone up. It's so much more successful now. So it sounds like the community asset transfer would be the best way, the leadership there would be the best way of securing the future of the pool. Now, I think you've run out of questions and supplementary, so I'm answering. In terms of you've not been satisfied with the level of enthusiasm, that's a bar that could never be met because you're asking to peer into someone's soul and find out how passionate they are about something. What I would say is we do want the community asset transfer to work, which is why we've extended the time and working with the community to make it work, because we want the leisure facilities to be available for people. But what we're saying is in a challenging financial situation that we are in, with that £8 million envelope, with many facilities across the city, we have to focus on investing in some and then look for alternative arrangements for others according to the criteria that we've worked through. But thank you for your questions and your supplementary. My next question is from, I'm just trying to find the name here. Chris Davis who's not been able to attend, but will receive a written response. And now I have two questions from Councillor Guy Pulteney. Can you ask your first question, Guy?
What is the estimated financial saving Bristol City Council will make by not including Kingsdown Sports Centre in the leisure services procurement package?
Okay, so that frames this in a way that doesn't capture what's going on here. First off, this is not about closing the centre, just to get that again, just to reiterate that. But this is not about making a saving, all right? It's a subtle but significant point to make. This is about working with the financial envelope we have to meet the city's needs across multiple assets. Well, I mean, again, I talked earlier on about we can enter into a conversation in a way that in which we try and create some space for us to understand where we're all coming from and find that common ground to come up with a solution. And I think that's the best way forward. But if it's, you know, but we have to conduct ourselves in a way to create that. What I'm saying is what we're not, there is, you said at the beginning, what's your policy around closing? We don't have a policy around closing venues. What we have to do is behave responsibly with finite council resources. So the way to do that, when you can't meet all the need that you would like to be able to meet, is you come up with a criteria, you work through that criteria, and you work through it in a fair way, and you get your result. If there are consequences of that criteria that produce outcomes that you would prefer not to have, then you look for other ways of meeting that need. Hence, the search for community asset transfers and alternative providers, you know, and being on that journey. Outside of that, I would say that there is some financial information that is commercially sensitive and could harm any conversations that we would have with potential operators, and it's not something, you know, I can share in this meeting. Supplementary or your second question?
Supplementary. When you decided to not include the option of keeping Kingsdown in the leisure package, what were your assumptions? If you didn't know what you'd save, or you weren't sure, I was about to say, why did you decide to close it? I'll meet you halfway, and I'll use different language. Why did you decide to cut 100% of its budget to zero?
When you're talking about assumptions, we didn't make any assumptions. What we looked at was the financial envelope available to us. We had a range of facilities, you know, across the city, set up a framework in which we think was very reasonable and in line with the city's needs, which is about which facilities are most heavily used and which facilities are most heavily used by people coming from areas of deprivation. You come out the other end of that. We know what those needs of those facilities are. They need updating. Two of them need extension as well. And then you gather the data. No one sits in a room. It's not a case of wetting a finger, sticking it in the air, seeing which way the wind is blowing, and then trying to capture the mood of the moment. That's not what is going on here. The productive place to be in this discussion at this moment in time is saying this is not a situation any of us would want to end up in. How do we do our best to get a solution from this situation? And the best place to get a solution at the moment is in the place of Jubilee Pool, with making sure there's a successful community asset transfer, the business case stacks up, and in the case of Kingsdown, working to find another operator who can take this facility on with the support of the community, make sure the users' numbers work, and then we can direct our investment to making sure that we are servicing the most people and those areas of deprivation. Do you have a second question?
I do. On page 237 of the document under 4.1 of the Equalities Impact Assessment, it states, although travel times and costs may increase by some users if alternative management options are not realised, which does kind of suggest it's closing, conversations have been undertaken with WECA to ensure that there is sufficient public transport to alternative facilities. What does the Mayor consider sufficient, and what assurances has he received from WECA that this will be delivered?
Again, whether it's been missed accidentally or purposefully is very important. We're not saying that there isn't a potential end date here, but the full sentence is, may increase for some users if alternative management options are not realised, right? But that doesn't mean we intend to close it. We're trying to find alternative management options. You know, and in a world, I mean, I don't know the world you grew up in, but in my world, sometimes you don't get everything you want, but you do your best to get as close to it as you possibly can in the face of finite resources. So it's not, again, it's going back, if I make the connection with your first point, there is not a policy of closing. There's a policy of trying to find solutions and behaving financially responsibly. In terms of the reference to WECA in the Equality Impact Assessment, that's not actually in relation to Kingsdown, it's in relation to Jubilee Pool. So I don't know if there's a kind of a misunderstanding that's gone there. There was a specific reference to transport in the EQIA in response to issues raised in the 2020 Jubilee Pool consultation. The Council's most recent position, as we've shared, is to consider the community asset transfer of Jubilee Pool. So our preferred approach, as I emphasised in relation to Kingsdown, is to retain this facility as a sports provision in a local community, you know, with a new lease arrangement to protect provision. I think you have one more supplementary if you'd like it.
Final supplementary then. Given that we know now how flawed, misrepresentative and misleading the data in the report is, particularly that used to produce the Equalities Impact Assessment, and the fact that it likely ignores precisely the people it's meant to protect, do you and the Cabinet feel that you can give the due regard required by equalities legislation when making this decision?
Yeah, I mean, just throwing around a lot of statements that, about the quality of the work done. No, we trust the quality of the work that's been done, and so yeah, we think we've taken these issues, we've taken all these challenges into account. In terms of tackling inequality in the city's never confronted inequality. Certainly when I was director of the LSP under yours and Gary Hopkins' leadership, the city never talked about inequality and inclusion in the way that we deal with it and confront it now. So the extent to which we have put tackling inequality, deprivation, the housing crisis, mental health, child hunger at the top of the city's agenda flows through into the way we make decisions about this, flows through into the way we set our budget that will become before this council next week. So yeah, we trust in the data that's being gathered by the facilities and our officers, and while we're not in a position that we would like to be in, all right, we'll look for solutions. And the invitation is to you guys to look for solutions with us. But that's your decision. So we don't think we have any more. Oh, sorry, we have a final two questions from Councillor Barry Parsons, who's unable to attend and will receive a written response. Any Cabinet members like to comment on this item? Oh, Tom.
Thank you. I think speaking more with my ward councillor hat on as one of the Horfield ward councillors, just want to say I really welcome the additional investment into Horfield Leisure Centre, with it being the most well-used facility within the leisure centres. It really is good to see additional capacity being created so it can be even more utilised. And as a user myself and a member there, it's really something I welcome. I think the other thing I'd just highlight as well is it does serve local areas of higher deprivation as well. So it's good we're investing in facilities that will also be accessible to people in higher areas of deprivation. And also, with many of these sites as well, they've got good bus routes. There are plenty of buses that can get up to Horfield, out to the east and out to Hengrove as well, where we're going to be having thousands of new houses in the coming years. So yeah, just say I really welcome the additional investment. Thank you.
Thank you. Asha?
Even though I'm not the ward councillor for Eastern Leisure Centre is obviously, to me, it's a centre that I've used for most of my adult life. And as you said, it's a tired facility alongside some of our other well-used provision. And, I suppose I've been frustrated sitting here because we're not trying to pit another community against each other. We have to make difficult decisions. And I personally will never apologise for trying to address inequality and disadvantage here in this city with communities that have been left behind for decades. So as Marvin has said and has been pointed out, we are solutions focused. We never said we were going to close Kingsdown, and I really do hope that you take up the offer to actually sit down and have those conversations where we are looking at an alternative provider to deliver Kingsdown. We've never ever said we want to close anything, but we have to find alternative solutions. And as Marvin said, sometimes we have to make some really difficult decisions, and it's not going to please all of the people all of the time. But I think for a quiet majority, I think the decision that we do take in terms of putting more investment into those facilities in disadvantaged communities, which is used by a lot of people across the city. I wanted to also remind everybody, I think COVID kind of put a stop on things, but again, we had that dilapidated swimming pool, the Jacobs Wells swimming pool, and that will proceed hopefully after we've come out of COVID. So it's not as if we're not investing. We're investing in provision that is being utilised by a vast majority of individuals. We're not saying we want to close Kingsdown. What we're saying is we're looking for an alternative provider, and there is interest there. So talk to the Mayor. Any other Cabinet members to comment? Okay, thank you. Final comments to the public. You know, I used to go Kingsdown myself. I used to do Kung Fu on a Saturday with Sean Vieira back in the day. Very successful club. My Kung Fu days are behind me now, but we used to go nonetheless. Listen, I totally appreciate it, and I love the passion for sport. You know, boxing was a big part of my escape from the circumstances of my childhood. So we understand that. We don't want any sports facilities to be closed down. We want young people to have that. It's physical health, mental health, community building, sports teams. When I used to move to a new city, the first thing I used to do was look for a sports club to join, right? Be it rugby or football, wherever I was. So we get that. Listen, this is my offer. It's not always good to communicate through, do petitions, questions, and statements. Absolutely fine. I'm not stymieing that. But what I would also do is make an offer that we can meet in City Hall. We'll meet in a conference hall, and we can talk to you about the plans and the potential to the extent we can go within commercial sensitivity. But we can talk to you about the plans and potential and actually focus on solutions for the facility. We'd be very happy to do that. If you'd like to reach out to us, we'll arrange it. Okay. But I thank everyone for your comments and questions. But in terms of the decision to be made today, I approve the recommendations set out in the report, which will now be displayed on the screen. Okay, next up, it's quite important, agenda item 19, which is COP, the Conference of Parties 26 updates. For those of you that are interested in, passionate about climate change, you might want to hang around to see what we're actually doing on this item. If not, happy to. Look, the paper was rolled over from last month because I was unable to attend Cabinet, but I really wanted to present it in person. It talks through the contribution and leadership role of Bristol to COP 26. So I was there with Cabinet member Nicola Beach, Bristol MPs Darren Jones and Kerry McCarthy. We also had our Black and Green ambassadors, Roy Kareem and Olivia Sweeney, who some of you may know made the national headlines with their presentation on making the environmental movement more inclusive, which is a point we've raised in the city because it has not been as inclusive as it should be or needs to be, historically and even into this present moment, which is a major challenge and a major problem. So more specifically, I was there for 2 days in particular. One was Finance Day and the other Cities Day. And that goes into the heart of our message, actually, which I'll share more about in a minute. We were there in our own right as Bristol. We were asked to attend because of what we've been doing here. But we were also asked to be there as a representative of some of the key city networks we are a part of, including the International Local Governments for Sustainability Network, Eurocities, the UK Cities Climate Investment Commission, Mayor's Migration Council, and although we are not actually a member of C40, we're not big enough, we were there representing C40 on stage because of the collaboration between C40 and the Mayor's Migration Council on the growing challenge of climate-driven migration. And as a city, we are one of the lead cities in that conversation, bringing it forward.
On these various stages, and Nicola may want to say something after she was on a few stages, as as well, being there obviously. We carried a set of messages. Among them, that the battle on climate change will be won or lost in cities. Now, interestingly, I think this was the first time in, I think someone said about 4 or 5 years, that cities had a specific item on the agenda at COP. And if you recognize that by 2050, almost 70% of people will live in urban areas, already accounting for 3/4 of global carbon emissions, you can see that that is a significant omission. The point we were making is that bad urbanization, chaotic, unplanned, inefficient, is going to be a problem, to put it mildly. That is going to drive inefficiency and drive resource use. But good urbanization offers density and offers efficiency, so we can lessen the burden of each individual lifestyle on the planet by offering them the opportunity to live in more efficient systems. Secondly, the point we were making was that cities and mayors should be put front and center of the development of planning for any COP commitments. The conversation can't happen with cities being a subject to be discussed. They must be in the discussions. Otherwise, we end up with national politicians with with limited understanding of what it takes to run a city, making decisions about cities without actually understanding what they are and how we function. And the third point we were making was that cities need finance to decarbonise. It's not free. One of the most naive comments often made, it's probably a politically opportunist comment, and it was made in this chamber, is all that's needed is political will. Well, it takes political will and a few £1 billion to decarbonise an economy. And work we've been doing with the UK Cities Climate Investment Commission, who we were there with, as I mentioned, with the World Economic Forum, with C40, who are now doing an incredible amount of work on finance. And obviously Mark Carney up at C40 also announced the $130 trillion package of, commitments around decarbonisation from finance, is trying to take on that challenge of how you match cities who want to decarbonise their systems with the finance that we are constantly being told is out there, looking for somewhere to land. A number of the challenges we faced on that front, by the way, and we shared, was that often it's difficult for cities to bring their decarbonisation programmes and their city redesigns up to a level at which they're ready to take to market, right? And that's whether it's taken to the public finance market, philanthropy, or private sector. So if you look at a system like mass transit system, that we're not going to get that ready to win investment for £100 or for £10,000. That's going to cost millions of pounds. So Yvonne Aki-Sori and Freetown's making the same point. It's particularly a challenge for city leaders in the global south, where that urbanisation is happening rapidly. How do they take finance from meeting those immediate needs of their population and put it into preparing projects? So how do we bridge that gap? I think the other challenge is that cities often do not offer the scale that's needed. So what we've looked at is how we have collections of cities coming forward so that we can offer scale of investment, not just as city regions, but as cities that aren't necessarily in close geographical proximity, so that we offer that scale and the investment, be it public, be it private, be it philanthropic, can actually move. And we're also looking at the possibility that the current financial models could be accessible to cities, but they just need another tweak, right? But where they are not, absolutely not accessible to cities and latched only to national governments, how do we create new financial vehicles that will specifically work with city leaders and networks of cities? And the other point we were making was about the need for a just transition. It often falls off the map. But if we do not take everyone with us and take care of their needs, the danger is we end up with a kind of a Trumpian backlash on what we have to do to decarbonise. And the danger is that through COVID, the most marginal have been hit first and hardest. They are least well placed to benefit from any upturn. The challenge around climate change, or the perversity around climate change, is that it is the most marginal who are most vulnerable to being hit by the consequences of climate change, but they're also most vulnerable to falling through the cracks as we begin to restructure the economy to be a decarbonised economy and fall on the grounds of unemployment and economic hardship. So we're making the point that the financing around climate change is not just about physical infrastructure and physical change. It has to be about how we support communities through skills, through family support, making sure we've got quality housing in place to be able to navigate the restructuring that we need to go through if we're going to meet our planetary responsibilities. So it's been on a very personal reflection front here. I think I am international by nature myself. Dad's Jamaican, great-grandmother Irish, granddad Welsh and all that type of stuff. My family's living in America and my sister married a Swiss guy. I am an internationalist, but I think what's struck a number of mayors over recent years in the face of a growing number of global challenges that national leaders have shown themselves unable to deal with when they work alone is just how significant the responsibility is on mayoral shoulders to step onto these international stages because of the burden of responsibility that's falling on to cities. And again, I referenced them earlier, climate change is one, but migration is the other. And then the interaction of climate change and migration is obviously that ultimate spot. So that's, we have received, one statement and 4 questions on this item, and then I will come to Cabinet. But the statement is from Councillor Tim Wise. So Tim, you have 1 minute. Can I invite you to the mic?
Thank you, Marvin. Firstly, we note this report celebrating the efforts of Bristol's administration in relation to COP26. I support the work, but I also feel it's very important to put it in the context, given the catastrophic outcome of the appeal by Bristol Airport Authority over the Bristol Airport expansion. The airport has previously been criticised by climate experts for grossly underestimating the impact of airport expansion, estimating it at 6 times lower than the figure calculated once other factors have been taken into account, details in the written statement. On top of the environmental damage, the decision, as North Somerset leader Don Davies puts it, flies in the face of local democracy, quite literally in this case. In summary, expanding Bristol Airport will generate vast sums, at least 1 million tonnes of CO2 equivalent every single year. That's 50% of Bristol's current carbon emissions. This sadly negates the efforts and, albeit limited progress,
10 seconds,
made during
Tim.
COP. But we'd like to put on record that at the recent WECA meeting, the Mayor's representative, Councillor Cheney, actually voted in favour, voted to abstain on a motion opposing the airport motion.
All right, thank you. Okay, so we have 2 questions from Dave Redgewell. Dave?
Yeah, thank you. Apologies to everyone. My question is about decarbonisation of the city region's transport system, really, and the progress we're going to make towards that. And it's not going to be a short, quick fix because we need money. So I welcome the 27 brand new buses we're getting with North Somerset Council this coming financial year. That is a win, and it's being paid for partly by the Clean Air Zone. I think the other question is how quick can we move to electrification of the bus fleet of Bristol alongside the hydrogen and gas buses. I noticed the Scottish Government and Glasgow City Council are obviously on track for more electrification of their buses within the city and obviously public ownership, I understand, as well. So we'll welcome that alongside the Clean Air Zone. And then what budget is being put aside really, I suppose, is at the city regional level to decarbonise the public transport system? Because 2030 is where we're supposed to be going for this. And we need to make sure we've got a plan in place for the bus fleet, in place for the rail system. And again, I go back to my first point. What is the government really doing for Bristol when it comes to sorting out electrification of that railway, which finishes at Chippenham and not to the city? So I suppose it's frustrating, but I just make the point.
And actually, one of the points we made at COP, Dave, was actually with the UK Cities Climate Investment Commission, we have identified £205 billion worth of decarbonisation opportunities across the core cities plus London. What we're saying to government is, let's lay out what those opportunities are, put them in sequence and begin to line up the finance to deliver it across buildings, transport, food systems, waste systems, energy as well. And that level of planning should have happened before COP. It did not. But hopefully by the time we get to the next COP, we're still president of that, of COP, we will have done the work. And look, I mean, the responsibility for the bus service now does sit with the West of England Combined Authority, of which we, are part. So, what we have to do is work within that structure to, and with operators also to improve the bus fleet and implement upgrades in time for Clean Air Zone in particular as well, which is coming in operational in the summer, of this year. And we do push that. There was some more money went into bus access at the last WECA meeting, but making the case for the decarbonisation of that fleet is important. A little bit tricky because it's already a private operator as well. So, we have to make sure that their business case is stacking up for it as well. But I will say, though, just to add to it, the electrification of the rail network around Bristol is scheduled for Network Rail's next control period, which starts in 2026. And we are lobbying them to commit to delivering completion of electrification in the area to that timescale. So make sure it happens sooner rather than later. Do you have a supplementary or second question?
I think my supplementary question is really mass transit. I know there's lots of naysayers around the Greater Bristol area, but when I was 25, I was engaged in Glasgow in putting in the present mass transit system called Transclyde. And it's there and it's tunnelled and it works and it runs today. It's been running now for nearly 30, 40 years. So I just say that we really need to make progress on mass transit for the city region and stop the naysayers from saying it can't be achieved, because it's been achieved in Nottingham, it's been achieved in Glasgow, and it's been achieved in Birmingham. And I just want to make that point, but we need a business plan, obviously, to get on and do it. So.
Yeah, well, the worst place to live would be in a place where you're guaranteed nothing's going to happen. And there's one guarantee from naysaying is nothing happens. But we have made progress on the mass transit system. We are going down those tracks. There are another 5 million has just been committed. We'll come back to the next combined authority meeting with more costs, more plans that take us up to the next stage. And what we have to do is remain committed to making it, to maximising the potential of it coming through. And we know it is very possible for the city to have that mass transit system. We remain committed, so rest assured. Did you have a second question?
Yeah, my second question. First of all, put on record all the help from Don Alexander on the bus issues. He grips it and gabs it. But we still need to know if the government's serious about decarbonisation and public transport, then the quickest way to deal with our public transport system is the buses, and in the city region, as you and the Metro Mayor know. But I think we need to understand from government why we still have a cliff edge, and it was grateful to see Andy Streets last night go public and support the 10 Metro Mayors in the calamity if we don't get the bus service operator grant, COVID-19 recovery grant. So really it's just saying, what case are we still making with the MPs, with the region in particular, with Devon and Cornwall, with Plymouth, with Somerset, Gloucestershire, and with our MPs and members of the House of Lords, and any other bodies that will listen to us, to make sure we don't get a cliff edge of COVID-19 bus operator grant, because it's no favour sitting down and working on a 30% set of bus cuts with Stagecoach Group or First Group, the big providers of buses in Bristol. No. And we need to just say, are we making the climate change arguments to grant chaps?
So I'll offer Don the floor if you want to. You don't have to. You might come in after. But I just two quick things. One is on the bus cliff edge. We raised this with the political leadership at the LGA, because obviously I'm now chairing the City Regions Board, so I'm in that. Nick Forbes raised that, and there was cross-party local government support for making sure that government were fully aware of the cliff edge we could be facing on bus funding, right, that we're approaching. So again, it's being raised at senior levels. Secondly, by the way, I'll just add to that, one thing that we can do around decarbonisation is making contribution is a good public transport system. The other is to build homes on brownfield sites in the middle of the city so people can engage in active travel. And we have had some opposition to brownfield housing development in the city, which is a real shame. Whether we're talking about Baltic Walk, Western Harbour, Bristol Zoo Car Park, Redland. What we have to be real about the need to meet the needs of a growing population in 42 square miles, protecting landfill ecology, but making sure people are in active travel distance to employment, entertainment, retail as well, and education, which is what we're doing. So it's both ends of that, where people are and how they get to where they need to get to that really matter. Don?
Yeah, thanks, Marvin, and thanks, Dave. As normal, I agree with everything you say. We do need the government to give more money to bus operators to tide us over what's going to be a very, very challenging few weeks. And we are working, we are working with WECA very closely at the moment to see how we can mitigate some of the problems that are coming down the road to us, if you'll excuse the pun. But whilst that's going on, we are still working on infrastructure, making our infrastructure more friendly to public transport. And the number 2 bus route, we are now processing enormous numbers of free text comments and information that's been supplied by groups and by residents. It's all being taken very seriously. £35 million project. We're going on with that so that when the government eventually gets its kind of compass organised, we will be part way down the road to having much better infrastructure. So the money that is available for buses, they will be running on better roads, and we'll have a better bus service because of it. So we haven't stopped, even if the government is confused at the moment.
Thank you. I did think that government money to support buses should have come with some equity in return, but anyway, that's a broader question. yeah, we shouldn't get free money back. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, thank you very much, Dave. Next up, we've got questions from Martin Fodel.
Thanks very much, Marvin. Yes, you know from previous Cabinet meetings and going back several years, I've supported the very large-scale investment in reducing carbon impacts in meetings here and elsewhere. But as well as large-scale investments, we also need the smaller-scale investments, hundreds of them, possibly thousands of them. And my first question is about finding out what study has been carried out to assess the potential for doing this through community mutual investments in Bristol, which I've been advocating for a couple of years now.
So thank you for that. So the Department for Digital Culture, Media and Sports grant funded a research project in 2018 called Financing for Society. And it was led by Leeds University, but Bristol were invited to test the legal options for creating a community municipal investment bond as an alternative form of council borrowing in relation to the Public Works Loans Board or other sources. In 2019, Bristol was awarded a grant from Horizon 2020 as a Sonnet City Lab to test Bristol residents' interest in CMIs and the financial viability of the council using CMIs to invest in retrofit measures across a portfolio of community buildings. We, approved its updated. We approved our updated capital strategy in December 2021. One of the significant updates in that strategy was in relation to enabling the council to enhance our approach to investing in zero carbon initiatives, and specifically to explore community municipal bonds of up to the value of £2 million to finance these. So our finance team has previously spoken with potential funding partners, our Treasury management advisors and other councils in relation to setting up such community municipal bonds to fund zero carbon initiatives. I'd also just point you to the city funds as well, which is actually a very innovative means of financial vehicle that we've been involved in. Other cities are now coming to us to copy as well, that again was involved in investing in the wind turbine for Ambition Lawrence Western as well. So mobilising innovative sources of money for community access has been something that we've really been working on. Thank you. Do you have a supplementary or your second question?
Well, my second question at this stage, thank you. So since the Leeds study, which I referred to in my motion to council a couple of years ago, several £1 million has probably left Bristol to be invested in initiatives elsewhere, including the ones by local authorities who have taken up, for instance, the community mutual investments options that I was talking about. So we do have capital in the city. I'd rather it was staying in the city, solving our social and environmental problems here, rather than leaving it. So when will Bristol start to mobilise the funds from its own community and elsewhere to tackle these important climate prevention initiatives?
Well, obviously, finance can go wherever. If it's people's investment, we don't get to determine where they do it. And there'll be many factors that determine where people invest, not just about local availability, but also their level of expertise, who they know, what networks they're a part of. So we probably will help to be kind of clear on that. But we are already working to mobilise finance. I just mentioned city funds. But from 2015 to 17, the council launched a competition to let roof spaces on council community buildings for local energy groups to finance and operate solar PV systems. Around 8 systems were installed through this initiative by the Bristol Energy Cooperative, and the investment was raised through member shares on the ETHEX platform. As part of the Bristol Community Energy Fund 2015 to 17, the council has distributed £244,000 in grants of up to £10,000 each for hyper-local energy initiatives, including development of the Cold Homes Energy Efficiency Services. We've also been supporting Ambition Community Energy, as I've mentioned, in developing a community-owned wind turbine in Avonmouth, including long-term land lease agreement on an undervalue and a contingent loan of £78,000 to meet some of the development costs. And this project has now received full planning permission from us as a planning authority, and is now proceeding towards financial close and construction contracts through 22-23. And that latter scheme, I think, is a absolutely fantastic, example of innovative finance, community leadership, community power, and sustainability. Did you have a supplementary?
Yes, thank you. I welcome all the initiatives you've mentioned. I've been supporting some of them for getting on a decade, such as Bristol Energy Cooperative. But as you say, there have to be factors that allow people to invest. And the whole spectrum can only be available if we actually have something like community mutual investments in the city, and we haven't, and that's why some of the money has been leaving the city and not solving our problems here. So that's when I'd like to know when Bristol will actually mobilise this part of the offer that is available. To me, it's a really positive offer. I'd just like the council to support it. The Sonnet project was linked to one possible City Leap partner, and I hope eventually City Leap does start to repay its investment. But in the meantime, we could have been mobilising this like several other local authorities in this particular council-endorsed option.
So Nicola will come in just a second. But what I would say, Martin, as well, is there are lots of things we could be doing at the same time. But it's probably worth remembering that in the autumn, we were confronted with a £43 million shortfall in the budget. It was down to £23 million, which is £19 million. Everyone's saying we need to be consulting on people, looking at what we do with our leisure centre strategy as well. The finance team have been working incredibly hard through COVID. So these are matters of finance that take financial expertise, and we've got to make sure we're on top of it as a local authority. We work finance incredibly hard. The strategy was only approved in December. We'll get through the budget and we'll get to it. But this is one of those situations in which we have to do lots of things at the same time. But Nicola, do you want to contribute to this?
Yeah, thanks, Marvin. I mean, are you going to come to the Cabinet? Is there a supplementary, Martin? So I'm just keeping up with where you are, because I can always give my reflections.
No, I was offering you the floor now in relation to this question, or you can do a supplementary, you can come in after, whichever you prefer.
I'll come in after if
Okay.
Martin's got a supplementary.
Do you have a supplementary, Martin?
Well, I did just ask one, saying, nevertheless, we need to have this offer. When will we have it? Which is what my first two questions covered.
Yeah, the finance team will be working on the full range of offers that we can make available to the city. Again, I respect their time. They are human beings, 24 hours in a day, need some sleep. We'll get through budget, but there is work going on now, but we'll get through budget, which is our big financial hurdle, and then obviously we'll focus minds. But just to say, not everything is happening. I'm not going to claim that, but lots of things are happening. Right, and that's important to kind of, I think, acknowledge that because of all the hard work that's happening in the city. Okay, thank you. I think that's it for.
Sorry, I did have a second supplementary.
Okay, go ahead.
I thought I was going to hear from Nicola first, though.
Did you want a supplementary, and then Nicola will come in after that?
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, I mean, at the previous cabinet meeting where I spoke as well in this chamber, we did actually offer several £100,000 of additional funding for the financials and the legals relating to City Leap. That's why I'd like to see this other part of the offer available in Bristol, not just the sort of single big hit that we hope will eventually be City Leap, because this has been mobilising money around the country for a couple of years now, and some money has left Bristol because it's not available in this particular city, in this council-endorsed option.
I'll take that as a statement rather than a question, but we'll let that one go. Okay, can I offer it now to Cabinet? Nicola, come in first.
Thanks, Marvin. Just wanted to give a couple of reflections. Sorry, I've got my coat on. It's just absolutely freezing in here. So I think my overall reflection is that going into the Blue Zone was quite a remarkable sort of space and kind of slightly overwhelming in terms of just the discussions and some of the debates that we were part of and participated in. But actually, a lot of the action for the cities was taking place in Glasgow City Chambers, where there were lots of discussions with the mayors and other city leaders. It was a really amazing few days actually to talk to cabinet members and mayors from across the country, cross-party, and just to reiterate your comment there that you know, the kind of lazy comment that all it takes is political will. In that room there for those 2 days were city leaders, cabinet members, mayors from across all political parties, most political parties, you know, sharing lessons working cross-party, because it is not about political will, it is about finance. And you know, just to repeat what you said then, that there's just no mistaking that. Skills was also a big part of the discussion that we had. So along with the Green and Black ambassadors, really talking about some of those embedded visible and invisible barriers in the environment space. And we've come back from there, and with the Centre for Sustainable Energy, working really hard to actually bring the people that are critical to the solution in much of the decarbonisation space, our sparkies and our plumbers, into City Hall, into that debate about how do we create a business model in which we can have a ready supply of air pumps and the other retrofit technology that we need. And when you speak to the likes of Gregors, as we did when we held our recent summit, they'll tell you that all their air source heat pump fitters are in South Wales, because the Welsh Government is funding a huge retrofit programme. So they have many air source heat fitters that live in Bristol, but they're working through the week in Haverfordwest. And so it's, I think it's just something that we should all remember about actually what it takes to decarbonise any city and any place. The last one I just mentioned was community energy, Martin. I know it's something, a passion that we share, and was really the envy of a lot of the discussions is the way in which we've been able to mobilise in recent years the community energy sector, and also use the community energy generated to decarbonise the council itself. And so that just is a quick reference to the sleeving agreement that we recently signed up to. I did just want to touch on the airport quickly. I think for me the airport debate just beautifully demonstrates that in truth, when push comes to shove, it doesn't really matter a fig what Councillor Cheney said in a WECA meeting, but with a national government that has a lack of policy on airport expansion and positive encouragement to regional airport growth, in this planning space, I'm looking at Clive Stevens now, we see time and time again that if a national government does not build policy, which is getting us out and through this climate emergency, then what happens locally, unfortunately, doesn't actually matter. And it's a difficult thing to say, it's a difficult thing to hear, but it is the brutal truth of how planning operates in this country. I'll finish now, Marvin, but I just wanted to finally just express my gratitude to Glasgow City Council for their kind hospitality, for the time that we were there. It was a fascinating few days, and we shared some brilliant ideas about, as I say, cross-party in city leadership positions, how we can decarbonise the UK cities. Thanks, Marvin.
Thank you very much. Any other cabinet members on this item? Okay, thank you very much, and thank you, Nick. I think we, I just say, being at COP, you know, the presence and the strength of our voice is out of all proportion to our size as a city, and we just need to thank all the council officers who've been driving this work, from the international team, the policy team, as well. Stephen was up with us as well, our Exec Director of Growth and Regen. And yeah, I think it was a really strong showing from Bristol. And it wasn't just for Bristol's benefit. We contributed to some of the big debates that are going on in the world at the moment, from the Bloomberg stage, from the UN stage, and so forth. So thank you, everyone. Cabinet notes the recommendations are set out in the report, which will now be displayed on the screen. Okay, let's move on to agenda item 9, Sustainable Procurement Policy. Craig Cheney, can you bring in this report?
Thanks, Marvin. The One City Climate Strategy and One City Ecological Emergency Strategy sets out a vision for Bristol to be a carbon neutral, climate and ecologically resilient and wildlife rich city by 2030. Currently, the Council includes environmental requirements into tender specifications in an ad hoc way. Market engagement has been used to develop an approach that prompts and rewards suppliers that do more whilst avoiding budget pressures or excluding other suppliers. The report asks Cabinet to approve a sustainable procurement policy and list of environmental requirements for tenders, approve the implementation and monitoring of the sustainable procurement policy, and approve the incorporation of the good food and catering procurement policy in line with the initial 6-month review period. Having a policy will set out our position for suppliers and partner organisations, and having a consistent set of environmental requirements will help us identify opportunities to secure environmental gains. Thank you.
Thank you, Craig. We have one statement and 2 questions on this item. The statement's from Councillor Fodor. 1 minute, Martin.
Yes, thanks very much. I'm making a sort of statement as a member of the Council, but in fact it was through the Resources Scrutiny Commission I was invited to chair, I think it was called a scrutiny focus group of internal and external stakeholders, cross-party members and other organisations to review this policy development, and I was delighted to do so. I've been promoting social and environmental value in procurement for a great many years. So just to draw attention to what's in the statement, and I know you'll have seen it, but the group really welcomed and acknowledged the importance of being more consistent and coherent in how we address these supply chain impacts, and we endorsed the approach, and we emphasised that the need to focus on contracts with a really significant impact, and also the contracts where be aware of some contracts we have very little choice of suppliers.
10 seconds.
Sure. We recommended a number of ways to make sure we get credible assurances from those making bids, and we want to be careful about adopting particular standards that may just be greenwashing. So please kind of take note of our recommendations. Thank you.
Right, thank you very much. We have 2 questions from Heather Mack. I welcome you to ask your first question.
Thank you. My questions get a little bit into the nitty-gritty. I used to work in sustainable food, so quite interested in that procurement side of it. I think I really welcome the policy. There's lots of great stuff in there. It's basically just questions about how it's going to be applied. There's a requirement around caterers needing to sign up to certain initiatives. I just have concern that there's a list of initiatives and says caterers could sign up to any of these initiatives, and some are about sustainability and some aren't. So it's sort a little bit of vagueness and a bit of reassurance that it is going to focus on the sustainability.
Yes, absolutely. So it would be, for example, the one you've mentioned around both culturally specific and plant-based menus. They would be required to provide both, not one or the other, and tick the box. Yeah.
Do you have a supplementary?
No, I'll just move on to my second one, which is almost supplementary. When do we expect to see the sort of measurable progress, and how are we going to be kept informed and see what progress we're getting from this policy?
Yeah, so we are working on a set of metrics at the moment. The Sustainable Cities and Climate Change Service are developing a framework which will monitor sustainable metrics, procurement metrics, and we're happy to share that with you as it develops. The policy and the environmental requirements will be reviewed in the first 6 months, and market readiness and progress will be assessed every 2 years.
Thank you. I really support this policy as long as it's got some teeth, and we're going to see what it does. Thanks.
Thanks, and thanks to Martin and the scrutiny team for all the work they did on it.
Okay, no more questions. Any other Cabinet members that come up on this one? Nicola?
Thanks, Marvin. I also welcome this report, which won't really be a surprise, and I think it is a big first step in terms of the One City Ecological Emergency Action Plan. That fourth commitment that sits in there, and I'll read that out, around our wider footprint. So it's people and businesses to reduce the consumption of products that undermine the health of the wildlife and ecosystems. And I think for us, this is a big step forward in terms of our choices and the way we procure our goods and services. And I think I'm just really supportive of that coming today, and I hope other organisations in the city look at this as a blueprint of how we can work together to get better outcomes. Thanks, Marvin. Thanks, Craig.
Asha?
Yeah, I was just going to say I welcome this new policy that sits alongside, incorporates the work that we did around good food and catering, because that was actually quite a real progress that we had made back in 2017, 18, I think, when we brought that in, the good food and catering procurement policy, which was welcomed by so many people in the city. So, yeah, the work that we have done around this work and how that plays into the work that we're doing around being a sustainable food city will really help us drive sustainable procurement and within the city. So, yeah, well done to everyone who's been involved in developing that.
Thank you, Asha. Okay, well, thank you for questions, statements and comments. I'm going to hand back to you now, Craig, to take the decision which I support and which will now be displayed on the screen.
Yeah, thanks, Marvin. Procurement policy is not necessarily the most exciting thing when you look at them on the tin, but actually when you consider the amount of services and goods that we procure as an organisation, it can have an absolutely huge impact. In terms of the recommendations to be made today, I approve the recommendations as set out in the report.
Thanks, Craig. So agenda item 10, expansion of Flax, Bourton, Mortuary to cease storage. Craig, you're going to bring this report, but as I said in the introduction, it does contain exempt appendices with commercially sensitive information, and any discussion on the content of this appendix will need to be held in exempt session, so please let me know if you want to go there. But Craig, can I hand over to you now?
Yeah, thanks, Marvin. I'm not really going to say very much on this one. So local authorities do have a statutory duty to in relation to death management, which includes the duty to bury or cremate and provide mortuary space. We need to increase our space. We are the lead authority for the region, and between ourselves and the other authorities, we will be spending about 1.25 million on increasing capacity at the Flax, Bourton Mortuary. Our Bristol City Council's contribution to that is about 500,000.
Thank you, Craig. We've had no statements or questions. Any Cabinet member like to comment on this item? No? I mean, I'll just make a quick comment. It's something that not many people know about, that we do, and I visited the facility. We also remember the staff really stepped up in COVID when we were anticipating the potential of more and more bodies as well, setting up the temporary storage up at Sandy Park. So yeah, it's worth just raising some profile of it. I think other authorities don't really do this, do they? Like, no, we do it for the region. Yeah, we do it for the region. So a really important piece of work. So thank you, Craig. Let me hand back to you now to take the decision which I support and which will now be displayed on the screen.
Thanks, Marvin. In terms of the decisions to be made today, I approve the recommendations as set out in the report.
Thank you. Agenda item 12, Community Resilience Fund. Councillor Ellie King, you're bringing this item.
Thank you, Marvin. I'm very happy to be bringing the Community Resilience Fund through Cabinet today. This fund will invest £4 million of capital funding in community and voluntary sector organisations to support the recovery and strengthen and build longer-term resilience of both organisations and communities in areas of the city who experience the greatest inequity. Based on research titled Designing a New Social Reality conducted by Black Southwest Network, VOSCA and Locality, the fund responds to the challenge to create more capital, allowing revenue streams to be re-established and assets to be managed effectively by community organisations. We will be building on the recommendations of the Citizens' Assembly in 2020, strengthening connections and shared understanding with communities through deliberative conversations and increased participation in decision-making. This will empower more people to become active in their community, increase democratic engagement and work together towards common goals. Priorities for investment are likely to include, but are not limited to, improvements to buildings, purchasing of equipment, upgrading digital infrastructure and increasing income streams. Many of these improvements will also increase inclusivity and environmental sustainability. The pandemic has shown how utterly invaluable our communities are, but it has also laid bare the stark inequalities that stubbornly remain in society. Hardwiring sustainability into our community assets and networks will help us build resilient neighbourhoods and thriving communities.
Thank you, Ellie. We've received 4 questions on this item. The first is from Councillor Tim Rippington. So, Tim, can we invite you to ask your question, please?
Thank you, Marvin. Unlike in some other areas of Bristol, there are almost no community buildings in Brislington, and most community organisations are based around parks and green spaces. So can this fund be used towards investing in new community facilities, or can it only be used by existing organisations to carry out and enhance their work?
The spending needs to be on capital expenses and on priorities which are identified by communities, the organisations, residents and councillors within those identified areas. This can include existing and new community spaces developed by community and voluntary organisations. And in exceptional circumstances, if there are no buildings in those areas that are eligible, the buildings that serve those areas but sit outside them can also be used. Whether the Community Resilience Fund is the right funding for a new facility in Brislington is likely to depend on whether there's an organised, strong community, a group of people working towards it.
There was a supplementary, Mark, Tim?
No, that's fine, thanks. I'll carry on that conversation offline. Thanks.
All right, thank
Absolutely, yeah, let's do that.
Okay, next two questions from Annie Stafford-Townsend. We invite you to ask your first question.
Thank you. Obviously, this is a great fund and we sort of welcome it, and thank you for your engagement with us as well, sort of outside the chamber. The voluntary organisations have already sort of engaged in quite a lot of reports and workshops. So how will these recommendations ensure an incentive for the communities to sort of engage with this additional process, and without there sort of being a guarantee of funds necessarily at the end, and what's sort of the value of money?
Quite a few ways. We're going to pay a grant to the VCSC organisations that I just mentioned before in the report to research priorities and facilitate that deliberative process and contribute to learning that the outcomes that will come with it, which I think will be really valuable actually. The process does depend on the willingness of the VCSC organisations to participate, and which is their choice. And any funding that we do of any kind requires an upfront investment, whichever way we deliver it. So there's always an element of risk with every process of funding that we take. So with an element of risk, but we think this is worth it because it delivers a lot of our outcomes from research that's been done and from the Citizens' Assembly.
Do you have your second question or your supplementary?
Can I do a supplementary directly to that? So what support will be given to the members of the public that want to get involved in the process to sort of understand what the process is, and what's going to be the incentive for them?
So the support will be given by the consultations that will be done with the VCSC organisations, VOSCA, Locality and Black South West Network and officers as well. There'll be a whole series of deliberative discussions, and I think it's also going to be a simpler process for many of the organisations because they won't have to do a lot of the application forms that you have to do with traditional funding, and it will help give a big picture of what areas need investment within the communities. So there'll be lots of learning outcomes from it that show the areas of need in their areas.
Okay, great, thank you. And then question 2 is, who's going to ultimately decide where the money is going to be spent? Is it councillors? Is it ward councillors? Is it area committees like we have for the SIL money? Somebody else?
So it will be during the deliberative process between the VCSC sector and the residents and the ward councillors who operate in those areas, they will come together, identify the priorities, and there'll be a shortlist convened, and then that shortlist will be deliberated on, and eventually go for an executive officer or myself, because it's all public money, so it has to.
So can ward councillors sort of get involved like we would do on a SIL process to sort of champion different projects or specifically support different projects?
Absolutely, but it is for the ward councillors in those identified 30% most deprived areas to get involved. It won't be for all councillors.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. The next question's from Christine Townsend, so welcome.
Thank you. I think the question's just been answered. Thanks.
Great. Okay. So That's it for questions and statements. Any Cabinet members like to comment on this? Don?
Yeah, thanks, Marvin. Just to say that, excuse me, £4 million is a large sum of money for the council at this particular time, but I really welcome it. Tim highlighted the fact that many areas of the city, especially on the edge, are really lacking community facilities now. Hartcliffe looks like it's losing its last pub. Lawrence Weston's already lost its last pub. And there's a real shortage of places where people can actually get together. In my ward in the last couple of weeks, we've had successful community asset transfers of 2 major buildings to the community. That's Avonmouth Community Centre, Shirehampton Public Hall. Both of those will be energised by the fact that the community now has a share in owning and running them. And this money will be really valuable, especially I think in upgrading some of the heating and the energy things that are in those buildings, which are quite old, and making them more efficient. And the process is one that's come out of the Port Community Resilience Fund, the kind of getting officers, councillors and residents together, and each sharing, understanding where each has something to contribute to the process and working together. It sounds a bit clunky, but actually it worked really well for us, rather than just having reams and reams of paperwork that puts off people who don't feel that they can fill in all that stuff. So just to say, really welcome this, and yeah, it's excellent. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Don. Really, appreciate the contribution there. Any others? Asha?
Yeah, I just want to say I'm just so excited we finally got this over the line. As you know, I've been very much a part of kind of driving the work that facilitated the research, designing a new social reality. So what I would say to every councillor is, please, if you haven't had a copy of it, you need to read it and understand that is a framework that has kind of been agreed by the sector in the way in which they wanted to, no, I'm not going to use that term, how we were going to recover coming out of COVID. We listened to what the voluntary and community sector said. We have taken on board best practice, like the Port Resilience Fund. That was a fascinating process out in Shirehampton, which brought people together. And it's so much, instead of the competition, it's more about co-production and collaboration. And so, yeah, I'm really excited in the fact that we've got that kind of a year's grace to enable the conversations to start to be happening in local communities before any money is actually spent. So, yeah, well done, Ellie.
Thank you, Asha. Nicola.
Thank you. And I'm now speaking as a ward councillor as well. So St George Central is sort of partly eligible for this fund. And I think it speaks to the complexity of cities. And Bristol is no different, really, that you have areas of poverty butting up to areas of relative affluence. And so my congratulations is to Ellie and the officers, really, about how purposeful they've been in the briefings to local councillors to make sure that this is pitched and targeted directly at the right communities in the city, down to even details about where to meet, which how to reach those communities and not, and sorry to reference specifics, but not to necessarily go to somewhere in the heart of St George near the park, because that actually isn't the target area, although it is a natural convening place for our part of East Bristol. And so I've just been super impressed at just how purposeful this has been so far, and I'm really looking forward to seeing this roll out in the Speedwell part of my ward in St George. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nicola. So really appreciate the comments, everyone. I'm going to hand back to you now, Ellie, to take the decision, which I support, and which will now be displayed on the screen.
In terms of the decision to be made today, I approve the recommendations as set out in the report.
And we'll be back with you shortly. So agenda item 13 now, Protect and Vaccinate Department for Levelling Up Homes and Communities grant. Tom, you're bringing this one.
Thank you. The number of people sleeping rough in Bristol has increased markedly since 2013, which has coincided with government reductions to local authority funding, welfare reform and the freezing of local housing allowance rates. This peaked in July 2019 with 130 people identified sleeping rough on a single monthly count. However, with the onset of COVID-19, the picture substantially changed, and following strong partnership working with many organisations and the Everyone In initiative, we've been able to reduce this. And the last annual street count saw us have 68 people recorded sleeping rough, and the most recent bi-monthly count in January 2022 saw this provisional figure drop to just 26. On 20th December 2021, in response to the spread of the Omicron variant, the Department for Levelling Up Homes and Communities additionally announced a Protect and Vaccinate scheme aimed at accommodating people sleeping rough and trying to increase vaccination uptake amongst the single homeless cohort. And this includes for the use of appropriate incentives such as travel costs, vouchers and funding for staff to take people to vaccination appointments. The grant has been allocated based on levels of rough sleeping in each area, and we've been allocated a total of £914,198. £914,198. It's been a long meeting. Protect and Vaccinate funding, which is made up of two elements, mainly for accommodating people sleeping rough, but also some for the vaccine uptake that will be looked after by public health. We've got to spend the funding by March 2022, so we've had to mobilise very quickly. And obviously one of the ways that we can have the most immediate impact in preventing the transmission of COVID-19 is providing self-contained accommodation, as well as a stable base from which to support and encourage individuals to get vaccinated. Whilst the accommodation support is intended to help increase vaccination uptake, I must be absolutely clear that stays will not be conditional on people having the vaccine. The council has entered into a contract with the Bristol Hotel to block book 50 rooms already from the 4th of January 2022. This is the hotel we previously used to successfully accommodate individuals during Everyone In, and that meant we could mobilise rapidly using pre-existing processes, agreements and experience. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tom. We've had no public forum statements or questions on this item. Any Cabinet members wish to comment? No, but you've got more coming up anyway, so we'll comment some more on your housing in a second, yeah? But let me hand back to you now, Tom, to take the decision which I support and which will now be displayed on the screen.
In terms of the decision to be made today, I approve the recommendations as set out in the report.
Thanks, Tom. So let's move on to agenda item 14, Project 1000, Affordable Housing Delivery Plan 2022-25. Do you want to introduce your paper, Tom?
Thank you. Project 1000 is an exciting step change in how we're delivering affordable housing in Bristol. We want to work with partners, communities and developers to deliver the homes we need in the right places so that we can better meet the needs of some of the most vulnerable people in our city. Building homes is about more than the number of dwellings. Everyone deserves fair access to a good quality home that is clean, safe and close to amenities. And it's one of the most effective catalysts to improving people's chances, creating resilient, inclusive neighbourhoods, enabling people to live healthy and sustainable lives. This work will also build on the plans we've recently taken through Cabinet, where we'll be investing an additional £1.8 billion over 30 years to deliver 9,000 new council homes over the lifetime of the HRA 30-year business plan, with over 2,000 of these delivered in the next 7 years. Specifically on this plan, we'll be maximising our influence and pulling all the levers we can to secure more affordable housing for the Bristol citizens, and this will be done through a few different mechanisms. One, accelerating the delivery of housing through the housing revenue account, which currently has over 1,000 new council homes identified. And using research and insights, the council makes sure these developments meet specific and local affordable housing needs. We'll also be working with Gorham Homes, our own council housing company, to accelerate the delivery of over 1,700 homes currently in their pipeline, with an additional 1,400 homes at Hengrove Park also proposed for the Gorham pipeline, which will go to Cabinet next month. We'll also be making more housing sites available by targeted disposal of brownfield land to the HRA pipeline, Gorham Homes and other housing partners. We'll continue to support the Homes West Bristol registered providers and other affordable housing partners with specialist policy, funding and delivery support and advice so they can maximise their own delivery. We'll also support other council services to manage an increased workload to facilitate Project 1000. We shouldn't estimate the amount of work that will be involved in delivering this, and that will include thinking about how we can explore the use of an accelerated and bespoke planning service. We'll also be ensuring affordable housing is embedded in the council's land disposals and major regeneration projects such as Temple Quarter and Froome Gateway. And we'll also be creating a diverse range of small-scale affordable housing projects that contribute to local community housing need by de-risking and disposing the council sites to community-led organisations, registered providers, small developers and self-builders. Additionally, one of the things I'd also just highlight is we'll be using innovative and modern methods of construction, because at the heart of this also has to be about sustainability and addressing our climate and ecological emergencies. We're already seen as one of the leaders in driving forward MMC, which has recently been evidenced by the Innovate UK scheme. There's just a couple further reflections I want to offer though. Achieving this will mean open, honest and robust discussions about where does Bristol build, so that we can ensure we meet the needs of those in acute housing need and enable their voices to be heard too, not just the residents that are already there. This will mean we'll need to think about delivering appropriate levels of height and density, building in the principles of livable neighbourhoods, and ensuring that we continue to protect important ecological sites and balance the needs of addressing the climate and ecological emergencies alongside our housing crisis. Now is the time to deliver on our ambition, and everyone will need to play their role in ensuring we succeed and do right by Bristol citizens. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom, and thanks for your leadership on, in this area. Newly elected in the summer, taking on a cabinet role, and really coming in line with that drive to get the right kind of homes built in the right kinds of places as well. So it really is valued. We've had one public forum statement and 5 questions. Statements from Clive Stevens. Clive, you have 1 minute to make your statement.
Thank you. I support this programme. The case for massive intervention is clear. It brings many benefits. It free up some money for the local economy too, retain key workers, and could even have a long-term impact on private sector rents. I do have some concerns. One is the reliance on Home England grants, and secondly, planning and the management of land. We definitely need higher densities, but there's going to be other private developers with other demands on our land, student accommodation, offices, expensive flats, even Airbnb. So this needs to be rigorously controlled. There will be some unused shops and offices, and maybe the council could buy them up and convert them to housing, do a much better job than
10 seconds.
The private sector. So I urge everyone to support this mission, and there's some big financial issues coming up, which I haven't seen yet, but really good thing to do.
Thank you, Clive. So you have 2 questions. So could you please ask your first question?
So the first one is allocation of land. How is the council, because it might not just be Tom, going to ensure that land is prioritised for the most needy?
So there's a few bits to this. Really, I guess the first place I'll start is the forthcoming local plan, which is obviously reviews how land is allocated across the city. Obviously, one of the things we have to bear in mind is it's not just housing that we've got to provide. We've also got to provide things like employment land too, so it has to be considered in that mix. Council land, we've got more say and more control over in terms of trying to get affordable housing delivered and social rented in particular. And what I'd touch on is if you can see some of the schemes that are coming forward, for example, through Gorham Homes, we're delivering 40, 50, over 50% on some schemes. So, the commitment on our own land is most definitely there. For the private land, it is tougher. The financial viability framework that's used to often get out of providing affordable housing is a challenge for us. Also, as well, there are competing calls when we're thinking about affordable housing on private sector development. People want their play parks. We want to have high levels of sustainability, air source heat pumps, all those other bits of infrastructure. All that costs money. And it then becomes a question of what gets prioritised. That said, we do have some sites that are coming forward with 100% affordable housing, not like massive sites, because obviously you need to think about mixed and balanced communities, which are being delivered both by the council and also through our registered provider housing association partners.
Thank you. I've got one supplementary.
Yeah.
So the WECA are bringing out their spatial development strategy on April the 8th, I'm told. Have you seen sight of that, and does that give you the protections you think Bristol's going to need?
I've been in quite a few meetings about it, it'd be fair to say, because I attend the Planning and Housing Board, that's one of the supplementary boards of WECA. What's come to us is a series of policies and principles rather than the document as a whole, where we've been discussing key issues, including things like addressing the climate emergency, affordable housing, meeting the housing target, because there is a very ambitious target that the government have set for the region, which has partly been made worse by the 35% uplift that's been applied to the top 20 urban areas across the country. But the way they've applied it means we absorb the entirety of that 30%, 35% within Bristol's boundary. Doesn't factor in like the northern fringe in South Gloucestershire, for example. So, you know, like many, I wait with anticipation to see what the final document looks like that comes out for consultation.
Thank you. My second question, there we go, might actually be for Craig, but he's not here. Oh, there he goes. So this is about whether the Finance Department have accepted that this is actually a mission, which it certainly seems to me, and therefore are they going to be implementing what's called mission-based budgeting?
So I'm not familiar with the book that was mentioned in your answer, but what Finance have shared with me is that the infrastructure needed to implement this approach is largely already in place, with the Council's financial system having a range of coding options which will allow the identification of income and expenditure to a specific project from across a range of headings. And you know, if there's any further follow-up you have of that, we can take that away and share that back in writing.
My supplementary to this one is, will Finance support the purchase, where appropriate, of rundown offices, rundown shops for the council to be able to redevelop into affordable homes?
I mean, I suppose the answer, the short answer is if the business case stacks up, ultimately.
Okay, thank you. That's a very good answer. Thank you very much. Great paper.
Okay, thank you very much, Clive. Yeah, next question, Tim Rippington.
Thank you, Marvin. I'd like to add my thanks to Tom for the sterling work he's done on this. It really has been very short time scales to bring such a major project through. As sites such as the Western Slopes have had their housing plans withdrawn due to ecological concerns, the numbers for housing will need to be made up elsewhere, because as we all know, despite the administration's good work, Bristol still faces a housing crisis. And this is something that comes up regularly in my conversations with residents in my ward. Brislington East has industrial land by the river in St Anne's that is currently designated as flood risk. If flood defences are secured, does the administration have an estimate of how much brownfield land might be freed up for affordable housing?
So I've obviously talked a little bit about the SDS already, so I won't go over that again. But within that, obviously a number of like proposed area of growth and regeneration areas, which are strategically very important to the redevelopment of the city. And I think two I'd pull out in particular. One is St Philip's Marsh and the other is Western Harbour, as well as parts of the city centre and wider Temple Court are also affected. But the total that we have worked out across the locations with capacity is 13,000 homes. That's not affordable, but that's the total. And with 10,000 new units at Temple Court and St Philip's Marsh alone, just to give you an idea. So it's a significant, it's about a third of what we think there is probably capacity to do in the city is tied up in flood risk zones.
Do you have a supplementary, Tim? Okay, thank you very much. And the last two questions, Councillor Tony Dyer. Tony?
Thank you, Mel. I was going to say, everybody else has said what a great job Tom has done, so I'm going to say what a terrible job Tom has done, and that's mainly because he still hasn't bought me the pint he owes me. On a more serious note, given the fanfare regarding the announcement of the government's Living Up strategy, has Councillor Reynard or any of his housing officers been able to identify any concrete funding proposals within the flurry of announcements made by the government since last Wednesday that would enable more genuinely affordable energy efficient homes to be built in Bristol over and above the proposals already going to Bristol's budget meeting?
The short answer is no. The slightly longer answer is that there's nothing new for affordable housing that's been announced. Although we are anticipating some news in the next few weeks on the rough sleepers accommodation programme, which we have used RSAP funding before for housing, and also the Care and Support Specialised Housing Fund Round 3, which is capital funding for extra care and supported housing and administered by Homes England on behalf of the Department of Health. These programmes could support the delivery of new specialist affordable homes in the city. Obviously, affordable homes being built in the city meet or exceed building regulations and the council's heat hierarchy requirements in terms of their energy efficiency, and ensuring they address fuel poverty and the city's carbon reduction agenda. And I think there's a couple of schemes I'd pull out that I've either visited or know about. One is on Constable and Crome Road in Lotley's, for example, where it will be completely gas boiler free, and that's one that's being delivered by Abri. And we've also got Brighter Places that are currently delivering schemes where they're building to passive house standards. There are others I could go on and list, but it is 6:20.
Oh yeah, jump in, Tony. Yeah, supplementary, your second question.
A quick supplementary, and I wonder if the Cabinet member would agree with me that, going back to discussions we've had previously about the need to get investment to tackle climate change, of which obviously energy efficient housing stock is a major factor. Without the level of government support that we need, we are going to have to turn to the private sector. And obviously that has problems of its own. Would the Cabinet member agree that what we really need from central government is the support for cities like Bristol so that we can tackle the climate emergency and the housing emergency, and doing those both together will help us ensure a just transition?
The Cabinet members may want to come in on this one as well, but yes, there's far more the government could and should be doing. I think one of the things I'd highlight is we're signed up to the Great Homes Upgrade, which is around calling for a national government funded programme to support the retrofitting of housing stock across the country. So that's something we've been very supported. You can find more details on the New Economics Foundation's website if you're interested. So that's one particular thing I'd highlight. So yeah, absolutely.
Your second question and supplementaries, Tony.
Thank you. My second question is, can a Cabinet member clarify that all homes built for or acquired by the Council's housing revenue account will be homes for rent at social rent levels, and that the minimum expectation is for these new homes to have an energy efficiency rating of A?
So I can confirm the majority of new homes delivered by the HRA are social rent. We do have some shared ownership in there as well. You know, one of the things we have to make sure, one, around mix and balance communities, but also scheme viability, and the costs of construction have gone up over 20% in a year. And, you know, I think many of you may have seen Midas recently filing for administration, which is further compounding some of those problems. And so therefore that we do include some shared ownership on that basis. Shared ownership homes are sold on a part rent, part buy basis, with purchasers acquiring either as little as 10% share and paying a subsidised rents on the balance. The majority of shared owners tend to buy about a 40% equity share of their new home, and then the unsold equity of these homes will remain under the HRA. Affordable housing delivered by Gorham Homes will be in line with local planning policy requirements, and obviously where possible we'll look to exceed, and have done in schemes we've already taken through. And so what that means is that 3/4 of the new homes secured through Section 106 will be social rent, and the balance is first homes that under the Section 106 compliant, because first homes coming in, you know, is going to also have an impact on the shared ownership that we have available, which, you know, could actually potentially be quite problematic for some people looking to achieve affordable home ownership in the city. So, and, you know, we'll get that point sometime.
I think you got. I think you run out. All right. Thanks. Thank you very much, Tony. Any other Cabinet members like to comment on this item? I've got a few things I'll just chuck in, trying to be very quickly, actually picking up as the questions came through. On the SDS, we are very aware of the deadlines coming up. This is really important for us as a framework for our local plan as well, which has implications for what land is going to be slated for. There are obviously some big decisions we want to make, so we need the SDS to work. I will share, Clive, that we met as South Gloss and Baines with Dan as part of a regular cycle, and said it's really important that as soon as possible we get the maps out and we begin to make an awareness of what's going on. And I think one of the things that we need to do early doors is put on the table those difficult cross-border issues. There are some decisions, and we're being upfront about this, we're not going to pretend that we don't have issues. There are some issues that we would like made that our neighbours would not like made, and there were some issues that they would like made that we wouldn't like made around housing allocations of affordable, and we need to put those on the table sooner rather than later, so we can begin to work out how we navigate our way through that. On flood defence was raised there. I mean, we've got our regional officers together across Bristol, South Gloss, Baines, and North Somerset. It's about £220 million, and we've said, look, what is the cost of putting in the regional flood defence that we need? This is an area that Nicola worked on, in the past as well. So, I was just checking a couple of days ago, where have we got to with that conversation, as well as knowing what the cost, that we're actually making progress towards making it happen. And again, as you mentioned with housing numbers, there's a really important element to that if we can put if we get that flood defence in the middle of the city, we take more homes in Bristol, and they're in active travel zones in the middle of the urban centre, right? So we get the mitigations, but we're building efficient lives as well. Levelling up. Tony, I mean, there'll be a standing invite. We just this morning I launched with a co-chair from LGA, which I mentioned earlier on, a levelling up review group. So there'll be developing a formal, over the next 6 months, a formal LGA response to levelling up. There already has been one, but there's obviously more nuanced feedback coming, pulling together think tanks, policy experts, local government from across the country. They're going to be engaging in a series of workshops, round tables over the coming months. You can come in through the City Regions Board that I chair, Martin Fodor sits on as well, but you can also feed straight into that process as well. And if you talk to Hannah French and our policy team, we'll be on the top, of that. But we're all frustrated by levelling up. What we want to do is approach government with a positive track. We don't just want to turn up and say, Michael Gove, it was all rubbish, because they just closed the door, right? We have to talk about how we make it as best as possible an initiative so that we get a listening ear and get the change we need. And then delivering efficient homes, there's the cost implications for that. Efficiency, more cost, fewer, affordable, and how we navigate those challenges. So right at the bottom of it is there's no way around money, right? We have to get the scale of investment we need. Government leveraging private, leveraging philanthropic money into that as well. So, welcome all the comments. And again, Tom, everyone's thanked you. I'll thank you again. But let me hand back to you now, Tom. Cabinet members. I don't think anyone indicated. Oh, Asha.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a point, because obviously with the EQIAs, they're always there to look at mitigation against kind of any risks for protected characteristics. And I just wanted to, again, remind everyone, and obviously with my portfolio, that we know that housing affects children's development, and this is a really, really welcome. What will be important is that children will get an opportunity to grow up in decent, affordable homes, and that will have a really powerful effect on their ability to thrive. So when we're looking at the numbers, and we'll have the conversation outside of here, it'd be good to look at in that development, looking at schools and children's centres and parks and green spaces and all of that. So, thanks.
Thanks, Sasha. Let me hand back to you now, Tom, to take the decision which I support and which will now be displayed on the screen.
In terms of the decision to be made today, I approve the recommendations as set out in the report.
Thanks, Tom. So next up, item 15, Public Sector Decarbonisation Scheme Phase 3. Nicola Beach, bringing this paper.
Thanks, Marvin. I'll try and keep it brief. So as part of our ongoing commitment to decarbonise Bristol's council estates and council estate, and meet our Scope 1 decarbonisation commitment, we've been awarded funding in the round 3 of the public sector decarbonisation scheme, and this paper formally receipts that fund. The public sector decarbonisation scheme is sort of the main show in town really at the moment from central government to support the public sector to decarbonise their heat and focus on the end-of-life fossil fuel heating systems that we currently have. I think this paper demonstrates that there isn't really going to be a moment when a switch is flicked and we have a decarbonised city. It is a series of these tiny changes, time and time again, which the administration is making, which will get us where we need to be. The 2 sites are at Blaze Primary and the Dean Field Study Centre, which were identified as suitable buildings for this scheme, as they are both heated by end-of-life oil boilers. They're part of a rolling programme of proactive maintenance, which is an initiative to identify the BCC buildings with the end-of-life heating systems and secure new grant funding to assist with the additional costs of installing a renewable heating system. All the design and feasibility studies were conducted in January 2021, and that has shown us that the decommissioning cost for the heating on both sites is 1.2 million. The eligible grant is 615k, and BCC are required to fund the shortfall. We're seeking approval today to accept the grant funding from the Public Sector Decarbonisation Scheme for this heating system. Thank you.
Thanks, Nicola. We had no public forum statements or questions. Any Cabinet wish to comment? No. I think there's a phrase in there that really stands out. There is no flick the switch moment when it's just that it is constant at work to deliver on this agenda. But Nicola, let me hand back to you. Take the decision which I support and which will now be displayed on the screen.
Thanks, Marvin. In terms of the decision to be made today, I approve the recommendations as set out in the report. Thank you.
Thank you. So back to you now, Ellie, for agenda item 16, Stoke Park Estate Restoration.
Thank you. Stoke Park is an amazing asset with varied and expansive vistas, flora and fauna, and important heritage. It is home to a World War II anti-aircraft gun battery monument nicknamed Purdown Percy, which, along with the landscape, are both on the Heritage at Risk register. The council acquired it in 2012 and designated it a priority site for restoration, and this paper sets out to submit a Stage 1 bid to the National Heritage Lottery, following on from a successful expression of interest last year. If the bid is successful, the project will deliver on the priorities identified in the Conservation Management Plan, which primarily include restoring the 18th century woodlands, hedgerows, scrublands and other habitats, improving walkways, signage, installing new toilets and utilities and a new Metrolink bus stop. It will bring heritage and learning opportunities to the site through the restoration of the monument and by developing a programme of engagement activities and events which will be co-designed with the local community. If the bid is successful, it will bring the park into a sustainable condition worthy of its rich history and diverse offering. It will create jobs and skills, development opportunities, community cohesion through co-development and co-delivery, and will offer the residents of the city a fabulous destination for health, well-being, fun and education, ensuring it is preserved for future generations to enjoy.
Thanks, Ellie. Marvin's had to just step away for a minute, so he's asked me to take over for a moment. So in terms of public forum, we've had one public forum statement and 2 questions on this item. The statement is from David Wilcox. David, can you read your statement? You have 1 minute.
Thank you. The Deputy Mayor. Stoke Park Estate is a massive asset of Bristol. It is more extensive than Clifton and Durham Downs and is closer to the centre. Hundreds of people visit the site of nature conservation interest daily, with a massive increase in footfall during the pandemic of people to get fresh air and exercise. It is vitally important that Stoke Park is removed from the at-risk register and preserved for the benefit of the city. I am pleased that Historic England and the National Lottery Heritage Fund is prepared to partner with the Bristol City Council to achieve this aim. Many Lockleys residents and I are delighted that plans do not include a car park, but do include 2 food and beverage sites and some much-needed public toilets. I welcome this investment into the council-owned park and Grade 2 registered landscape, enhancing it and protecting it for future generations.
Thanks, David. We did have 2 questions, but they're both from Councillor Marley Bennett, who I don't think is here. I can't see him anywhere. So he'll get written answers. Okay, thank you. Do I have any cabinet members wish to comment? Nicola?
I just want to say, as a total history nerd, I'm chuffed to bits that this paper's come to Cabinet today. I think that the story of the war in Bristol is complicated and also covers most parts of the city. I think if we are successful with this, I think it brings a whole new dynamic to that story and just the importance of, how the war shaped Bristol. And I think this is another chapter in that story. So I'm really chuffed that this has come through. Thanks.
Great, thanks, Nicola. Okay, if no one else wants to comment, thank you for your comments, and I'll hand back to Councillor King to take the decision, which I will support and will now be displayed on screen.
In terms of the decision to be made today, I approve the recommendations as set out in the report.
Thank you, Ellie. We now move on to agenda item 17, Dynamic Purchasing System Contracts, Children's Play and Natural Stone Walls. I'll ask Councillor Ellie King to introduce this report.
Thank you. This paper asks Cabinet to approve 2 4-year dynamic purchasing system contracts for children's play equipment and facilities and for the repair and maintenance of natural stone walls and masonry in our parks. These contracts will enable us to increase our choice of suppliers when sourcing equipment or repair services in the maintenance and development of our parks estate. Crucially, this will accelerate delivery of new and upgraded facilities approved for funding by area committees such as playgrounds, hard surface courts, cycleway tracks, outdoor gyms, activity equipment for adults with disabilities, youth shelters, seatings and bins. This paper also asks for approval for a new purchasing system for wall maintenance in order to future-proof our heritage assets, of which we have over 50 kilometres across our parks estates. It won't only be the Park Service who can benefit from this new purchasing system. Other landowning parts of the council, in particular housing and landlord services, will also be able to procure work through this framework to carry out maintenance whenever it is required on BCC land. This will improve cross-departmental work, reduce time spent on procurement and help to ensure that the 3.3 million of investment allocated between 2019 and 2024 turns more quickly into delivery and new facilities that will be enjoyed by park users.
Thank you, Ellie, for that. We've had no public forum statements or questions on this item. Any Cabinet members wish to comment on this? Tom?
Just briefly to say I really welcome this, I think particularly for the potential benefits to housing and landlord services. I think the other thing I just say as a ward council is just, how important play parks are, and, for area committee projects to be able to be sped up through this is really welcomed. I know how much my local residents in Hawford have really enjoyed the new swings that were installed just before Christmas, and the huge difference that what might seem like a little thing to some people has made to the lives of residents in my ward and their children.
Asha?
Well, I can't not welcome this. This is a really important for children's play in the city. So I'm not going to labour the point, but well done. Welcome the opportunity for us to spend all that money over the next 4 years to address play in the city. So thanks.
Thank you. Okay, so let me hand back to you now, Ellie, to take the decision which I support and which will now be displayed on the screen.
In terms of the decision to be made today, I approve the recommendations as set out in the report.
Thank you. And the final item for today, agenda item 18, tree strategy and tree planting plan. And this was you, Ellie.
Another exciting paper for me to be bringing forward. One of the great objectives of having the convening power of the One City platform is that it sharpens and focuses the city's priorities and aspirations, which informs and enriches our thinking as a council and as an administration. One such goal, as we know, is to double the tree canopy, and this paper sets out how we get a hook into this highly ambitious target that will bring benefits to the well-being and health of our residents and work towards our ecological and climate targets. The plan will set out to identify all possible planting locations, consult with our partners to ensure best practice, identify funding opportunities for scaled-up planting, and require the very best of our collaborative One City approach. We've planted 70,000 new trees since 2016 through the One Tree Per Child initiative, amongst several others. This year, we are adding another 10,000 trees to our canopy, which is 1,000 more than last year. And as this report sets out, we may well need to invest many millions of pounds to plant hundreds of thousands more trees to meet our ambitious targets and support our wider work towards net zero. I've been out with council staff and volunteers planting trees in my own ward, Hillfields, recently, which has less than 10% tree cover, making it one of the wards with the lowest canopy in the city. Equalities are at the heart of this Labour administration, and planting work will be underpinned by prioritising programmes in areas of high deprivation or low canopy, ensuring we deliver social and environmental justice hand in hand.
Thank you, Ali. So we've received 2 public forum statements for this item. The first is from Bristol Tree Forum, who are unable to attend, and a statement has been noted. The second is from Councillor Emma Edwards. So you have 1 minute to make your statement. Oh, not here? Okay.
Sorry, could I just comment? Unfortunately, she's at home waiting a PCR test result, but could I just draw attention to this? Councillors King and Beach have both taken part in the working group that the statement covers. We've been working on this since last summer because we saw the need for this in view of some of the problems that have arisen around tree protection and so on. So we do endorse the work, and we've already done a lot of work with officers and those stakeholders, including the tree forum.
I did kind of leave it open in all trust. There is no problem for tree protection. What there is very difficult decisions about how we manage land and build homes. I don't know. I don't need to come back. I just think, come on. So, look, thank you for everyone. Ellie, really appreciate your, picking this mantle up and driving it. We do have an incredibly ambitious goal in the city to double the tree canopy. As you said, we've developed that ambition with our city partners and working together is the way we're going to get this done. Did any of the Cabinet members have a comment on this item?
I just want to say thank you to Ellie. I have never met a person in this city who cares about trees more than Ellie King. Since joining this cabinet, she is, people think I'm a bit forensic about things I care about, right? This woman to my left is obsessed with working out how we make this tree strategy a reality and how we actually get all the trees we need in the ground. And so it is just to take that moment as we finish cabinet today, just a hats off really, because she's on it. Thanks.
Yeah, much appreciated, Ellie, for your leadership in this area. So let's hand back to you now to take the decision which I support and which will now be displayed on the screen.
In terms of the decision to be made today, I approve the recommendations as set out in the report.
Thank you very much. So that's the end of today's Cabinet meeting. Thank you to everyone for attending. The date of the next Cabinet meeting is Thursday, the 3rd of March at 4 p.m. So I'll see you there. Thank you.